This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at thebatmanuniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Of course you can't find a camera attached to my device, so there is no camera attached to my device. So, there you go. You just did a shag laugh.
Is that how he laughs?
That's how he laughs sometimes. It's like 5 seconds to a...
Oh, that... He does do that one, yeah, absolutely.
Gotham City, like any other large metropolis, abounds in girls of all shapes and sizes. Debutantes, nurses, stenographers, and librarians.
Gotham City Library, Miss Gordon speaking.
Lopez hair removal. This is Jose.
Holy transformation. 1 minute, plain Barbara Gordon, librarian and Commissioner Gordon's daughter. And the next minute, something new has been added. Batgirl, modeled after her idol, Batman.
Holy apparition! No, Boy Wonder, I'm Batgirl. You are no longer alone, Capes Crusaders.
It took me 3 years to track down the Jade Gato, and 3 more to figure out how to steal it.
Funny, it only took me 10 minutes to figure out how to snatch it back. No matter how you do it, crime doesn't pay, girls.
Sawate, I'm your host Stella, and this is Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast, episode 160. This is a big one, folks. No Man's Land, part 1. for August MMXVIII. Batgirl the Oracle is brought to you by...
It's time for some thrilling heroics, a brand new podcast on twotruefreaks.com. Keep Flying, a Firefly podcast. We aim to do the impossible, cover every episode of Joss Whedon's science fiction space opera western, and that makes us mighty. We found as fine a crew as ever populated the podcasting verse. I told them I had a job, they said yes. Didn't much care what it was. So join me, Andrew Leyland. I fought for the independents. May have been the losing side, not so sure it was the wrong one. I'm joined by a man too pretty to die, Mr. Paul Spataro. And last but by no means least, a man with a mighty fine hat, Shepherd Bill Robinson. So join us on twotruefreaks.com for Keep Flying, a Firefly podcast. We aim to misbehave.
Batgirl the Oracle is also brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering a discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out MileHighComics.com. Well, this is a landmark episode, in my opinion. Someone that is not in the podcasting world asked about my podcast, and I said, I'm coming up on something huge. I think people have been waiting for this. I could have, maybe I was blowing it out of proportion, but I really believe that. And I had a short list of people that I wanted to join me on this journey, and this guy came up very close to the top. Probably was the top, honestly, because he sent me his original trade paperbacks, and so it was really him that introduced me to this storyline. So I am forever grateful to this man, the great Michael Bailey.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I remember. I can actually remember. I sent those when I was at work, because where I worked had a shipping thing, and I got a discount on it. So I remember packing those up and going, I don't really need these anymore. The funny part is that I thought I didn't need trade paperbacks of No Man's Land, and then I saw a really cheap lot of the new ones a couple years ago, which has everything in it. So they're back on my shelf.
Okay. Oh, man. Well, yeah, I am just so appreciative. And so whenever I crack those open, I'm like, oh, Michael Bailey gave these to me. So it's really apropos, I think, that you are, number one, just on any of these 5 episodes, but number 2, just on part 1. I think it worked out really well.
Well, I appreciate it. This is a story that I have a lot of affection for. I did not read it new, but when I read it, it was, we'll probably get into that in a minute. But it's just, like I said, when we first started talking before we started recording, quote unquote, I was just like, any chance to talk to Stella is a good thing. Oh. So you're like, do you want to come on and talk about Gilmore Girls? I'll be like, I don't really watch it, but I'll talk Gilmore Girls with you.
Oh my goodness. Well, you're better than I, because Shag asked me if I wanted to guest host on Justice League International, the blah 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 podcast that he has, and I told him no, but it wasn't because I didn't want to talk with him. It was because I didn't really have any expertise and I didn't want to drag his show down. But apparently the right thing to do if you're friends is just say yes no matter what and just sort of BS your way through. So I'm so sorry, Shag. I'll try to make it up to you. But he always brings it up, so.
Guilt is one of Shag's many talents. So
that's probably true. Well,
suck it, Shag.
Oh my gosh! When we get to actually the coverage, I'll explain how we're going to be doing this, what order in the trade that we're following. So just be aware, I will give you a guide as to how this is going down. This is part 1 of 5, so you can expect this to carry on through December, which will be my anniversary episode, so that's apropos as well. But since I've got Bailey on here, I thought to myself, we need to talk some Superman / Supergirl stuff. So I cut the cable, as it were, and I can't, in my little PlayStation subscription get the CW. So I recognized that I wasn't going to be able to watch any of my little shows until they hit Netflix. So once I came back from Kenya, I sort of just wanted to decompress. I ended up watching very quickly Supergirl Season 3. And so I think you probably were watching it live as it happened. I remember seeing maybe some posts and things on Facebook, but I tried to stay away from it. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about this particular season. And mostly, actually, I want to talk about Brainiac 5. But what were your overall thoughts of Supergirl Season 3? Did you have any impressions of it? What did you think in comparison to the previous 2 seasons?
I think this is their strongest season so far. I enjoyed the first season. I thought it was a good coming out of the gate, so to speak. Season 2 kind of lulled me into this kind of false sense of security because it began with those 2 great Superman episodes,
sure,
which I absolutely loved. I rewatch that first scene of, where Clark Kent's at the little newsstand and he sees it, she sees it, and they save the space plane because it's Superman Returns. But I think that season, since it was the first CW season, I think they relied too heavily on the romance angle to propel the story forward. And it's not just, Mon-El and Supergirl. It was, as much as I liked the fact that Maggie Sawyer was on the show, it was just it's just too much. This season, it was kind of fascinating because it started off one way, and when they came back from the mid-season break, it's like it was a completely new season. Like they were continuing the story, but there was a dramatic shift in the tone of the series. But I really enjoyed just about everything about the season. I enjoyed seeing the Martian Manhunter from Justice League and Justice League Unlimited come to play John's dad.
Yep.
I liked Rain. I liked her. I liked Ruby and the whole relationship there. I liked the slow turning of Lena, not so much evil, but a little more chaotic neutral, I guess you could say. I enjoyed watching Kara just go through her paces. I thought they gave her a lot to do. I love Alex. Jeremy Jordan, who left at the end of this season, it was really funny. About a week before they announced it, I go, God, this guy's way too talented to be on this show. And it's not that the show is bad, but he's a secondary character, and that dude's not a secondary guy.
Yeah.
He has got singing and dancing chops that are just out of this world. I was watching Newsies on Netflix, and I was just like, God, this guy's good. It's just, even though I have problems with that version of Newsies because it's not the movie and I'm old, but I think they had some fun episodes. They did a Smallville episode early in the season showing Kara and Alex as teenagers.
Oh, yes. And even mentioned a wall of weird.
Mm-hmm, and solving a problem in their little town with her superpowers and keeping that a secret. I was just like, this is such a love letter to Smallville. Mm-hmm. And even the ending, even though I think, and this is total spoilers, y'all, I think Kara has gotten off very lucky so far because she's done time travel and not everyone hates her.
Sure.
Unlike Barry, who everyone hates because he used time travel 15 billion times. Yeah. But no, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a much stronger season, and I'm really curious as to how they're going to, go forward in season 4.
Yeah, I agree with you. I very much enjoyed it as well. I think broadening the cast in the sense of really making it character driven and really getting to know these characters and not being annoyed when they took time out to, go to Lena Luthor or Jimmy, something, just really making it feel like an ensemble cast, I thought was great. There are some things I felt like with the Alex and Maggie, that was just such a long drive to the breakup, and I felt like Maggie was saying the same things multiple times about she wants to be with her, but she also wants kids. And I thought, after one conversation, you'd think she'd come to some sort of decision, but just repetitious And I was also concerned of how long the will they, won't they with, Kara and Mon-El, and just sort of the awkward love triangle, but it kind of turned out okay, but then he came back and all that stuff. So there were some mild concerns from me, but overall I really enjoyed it, and, I binged it basically, so that shows how much I enjoyed it. I will say, though, with Brainiac 5, I think it was you that posted a picture of him.
Yes.
I don't know what exactly you said, but I'm pretty sure I posted something underneath it about like his lack of handsomeness, and I guess that's probably pretty bad for me to say. I guess I was like android shaming, but what I really, because I always feel like, and you are the expert here, don't Supergirl and Brainiac 5 have a romantic relationship?
Yes, they were involved in the Bronze Age, and this I think it started in the Silver Age, but there's a really great shot, and I think it's in Crisis 8, where Brainiac is working on something, and the Legion is basically like, dude, it's okay, and it's right after she died. And they did an annual. I think it's the Supergirl annual from '97 when they did the Pulp annuals that year. And I think it was the My Romantic Adventure or something. And it was her and the Brainiac 5 of that era, like the Supergirl of that era and Brainiac 5 of that era kind of teaming up.
Okay.
And so I wasn't really expecting that. The guy that got to play it, I was just like, is this like Ezra Miller's cousin? Because he reminded me a lot of the Flash from Justice League, just in his kind of his tics and all that.
Sure.
And he was out of makeup a lot because I guess that makeup is expensive. And when I first saw it, I was like, "It's your kids, Marty. We got to do something about your kids."
Oh my!
As they all hop in the DeLorean and go back to the future,
Sure.
But I thought the Legion stuff played nicely.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I didn't have a problem. They needed to settle things between Supergirl and Mon-El before they could even start. I think having like any kind of romantic entanglements or attraction between the two of Brainiac and Supergirl would have distracted from what they were trying to do, because I've seen on Twitter, and I know it's the internet and people are angry, shocked, surprised, gasp. But there are people that are angry that the Mon-El Supergirl relationship ended as it did, and I think it ended perfectly. I was just like, no, get him off the table. He doesn't need to be here. I'm glad they gave him a costume this year. But, they played all that out, and just continuing them together, there's nothing there anymore. So actually having him choose to go back to the future with Wynn and Irma and to be with the rest of the Legion, I thought, no, this is how you do it. This is what you need to do. And I think Supergirl, more than anything else, by bringing in Brainiac 5 and taking Wynn kind of off the table as a permanent guest star, I really think that they're breaking kind of the CW superhero mold, because the Flash does everything it can to keep that group together.
Sure.
Like okay, Caitlyn's got weird powers and she turns into the Hulk, but we're going to keep her in because this is the cast, and this show and Arrow seems to be kind of on a similar path where they got to keep that core group of people together, and Supergirl's just like, nah, John's going to go off and find himself, Alex is going to take over as the head of the DEO, and Mon-El's going back to the future with Wynn. And I'm just like, wow, that opens up a lot of possibilities of what they can do.
Do you sense any chemistry, though, between Brainiac 5 and Supergirl? Could you see those two getting together?
I could see them eventually, but they would have to do it slowly.
Okay.
I don't think they could just make that happen.
Yeah.
I would think, it's almost like, Data dating somebody on Star Trek The Next Generation, which they actually did an episode where he had a girlfriend. Oh. And it's just like one of those things where I don't ship them necessarily, but I'm not opposed to them being shipped.
Okay. I can't do it right now. I just don't see it right now. I guess my fond memories of Supergirl and Brainiac 5 are coming from Justice League Unlimited.
Yes.
Yeah. So That was my thinking. I thought, who is this guy? I don't see that at all. So, guess we'll see. Is there sort of a Red Sun, Superman, Elseworld-esque thing going on with what we saw at the very end, where she lands?
Yeah, and they've talked about that in some of the lead up to the new season, that they're kind of playing off of that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to have to do with what she did when she went with the Legion ring.
Oh, sure.
I don't have any confirmation on that. That's just my opinion. But I think they are going to do kind of a Red Sun-esque version of her.
Okay.
It's not going to be, Red Sun, because obviously it's not another Earth where, they have, where she was raised by the Russians.
Yeah.
It was a good cliffhanger to end on, though, because it was just unlike the previous year. I was just like, oh, where the heck is this going?
Yeah. Yep. Well, very cool. I can't wait for season 4. I guess I will have to, though. I'll have to wait until the summer. But I'm especially excited for the crossover that they'll have this year, because they'll be introducing Batwoman.
Yes.
Recently, Ruby Rose was cast as Batwoman, and I guess I was naive, just like I was with apparently the War of the Superman. Is that what you called it? That thing that broke the internet with the Man of Steel? Was it called?
The Civil War? Yes.
So I guess, I'm naive in certain things. But I thought people generally were excited that Ruby Rose was cast. But then someone on Twitter told me that, well, number one, she left her Twitter probably because of this. But I guess people have been saying she's, not gay enough, whatever that even means. And they're upset with the casting. I can't even believe it. I was super excited for the casting. I thought, this is great. She embodies, I think, the Kate character, especially in, I was about to say New 52, but in 52, I remember how Kate, considers herself a lipstick lesbian, and Ruby Rose is very beautiful, so I just feel like that's perfect casting, and I don't really think that, not being gay enough exists. I don't even know what that means, but, yeah, I'm just excited to see her as Batwoman.
And the other thing is, people don't want a gay superhero. So you had that as well. It's just like nobody can be happy now, essentially. You're going to have these factions that are extreme on both sides. Supergirl got hit with that back at the beginning, right before season 3 hit, when they were at Comic-Con and they did the singing of they did it after the first season, so they had it planned a little better for the second season, where Jeremy Jordan was basically doing a song recapping the season.
Oh.
And at one point he made a comment that no, Lena and Kara are not going to get together, and suddenly he's hit from a certain group saying, oh, you just don't support LGBTQ characters and such. And it's just like, one, you don't know who Jeremy Jordan is if you say that, but two, it's just like, why are you one, not every character has to be together.
Sure. Two,
I get what you're saying, but just because the two actors have very good chemistry together doesn't mean that the characters should be romantically linked. And three, leave poor Jeremy Jordan alone. He's a great guy. But now we have it from all sides, where one side isn't happy because it's not enough of what they want, and the other side doesn't want it at all. And I looked at her when they announced it was her. I didn't know who Ruby Rose was because I don't pay attention to anything anymore. And so I Googled her. And I see this woman with tattoos, and she's kind of skinny, and she's got part of her head is shaved. And I'm like, oh my God, that looks just like Kate Kane from the comics. I was just like, this is some of the most perfect physical casting I have ever seen.
Absolutely.
And then Rachel kind of briefed me on who she was as a person. I'm like, they went out and found Kate Kane. I love Batwoman. I did stop reading the trades because I was going through starting with Elegy and then going into the New 52, it got way too kind of weird at one point.
Yeah.
Kind of keying off of what Greg Rucka had done with people becoming, turning into were creatures, sort of. And I was just like, I'm not into this. I just kind of want to see her and Maggie together.
Sure.
But no, I'm totally excited, and I'm totally on board with a Batwoman TV show.
Yeah.
This is going to be fantastic.
I wonder if they'll pull Renee or if they'll use Maggie.
It would depend on if the actress wants to come back. She didn't come back to Supergirl, but if it's in Supergirl's universe,
sure,
then I'd be down for that. I'd be down for introducing Renee Montoya and having that character.
Yep.
I don't know if I want her to become the Question, but I'm sure they will eventually do that.
Sure. I mean, they might do it in the Birds of Prey movie.
Yeah, so and well, you've got that going on too. It's just like it's like a really good time for female Bat characters.
It seems like it. Yeah. I just hope that if there's downtime and Kate meets up, that there's not the obligatory makeout session with Alex like it happened in this previous one with Sarah and Alex. Because I was like, why are you throwing these two? Like, does it have to happen like that? Yeah. So.
It didn't have to, but I think because Alex was getting over her breakup,
sure,
and Sarah is just that type of character, that I really liked that it happened, because it's this is going to sound weird. I think it's kind of what Alex needed.
Yeah.
But I'm weird. So what do you think about that?
Well, we accept you here at Batgirl the Oracle. Well, moving on from that, I wanted to move into my last Superman topic, and it's actually the new direct-to-video film. It just dropped, I guess, in August, right? Or was it July?
The digital dropped at the end of July, and it was like August 7th that the Blu-ray and DVD were released.
Death of Superman. Now, this was a bit of a shock for me when I found out about it. I think I found out about it at the, Batman and Harley, when I was watching that at San Diego Comic-Con. And I thought to myself, why are we retreading this territory? And I understand that Bruce Timm felt bad about Superman Doomsday, and he felt like they could have done more, and so now they're splitting up into two parts, right? Just two?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be
three.
Death of Superman and Reign of the Superman.
Reign of the Superman. And so I went into this, watching this film. Well, let me also say that I actually like Superman Doomsday. I think that may have been one of the first, if not the first, direct-to-video.
The very first.
Yeah, so I
this line.
Yeah, because it was back then that I consistently bought them because I trusted them. I think the only one I didn't buy was Green Lantern. But just it was good quality. I enjoyed it. I thought there were some really good moments. I understand that it's not everyone's cup of tea. So this one I thought, we'll see. And I saw a trailer, and I was upset that the Justice League wasn't. And it was like New 52, so it was like kind of in continuity, but still on its own. So I was going in not really too sure. After I saw it, when I was watching it, I thought, wow, this is actually really good. The character moments, developing the relationship between Lois and Clark, and I don't know, it was just really well written. I thought one of the most well written films that I have seen, especially recently. And then I saw it was Peter J. Tomasi. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yes.
But I would love to hear what you have to say about this film.
If I wasn't at work, I would have bawled my eyes out at the end of this movie.
It was hard, yeah.
And for a number of reasons, when is this episode coming out? What day?
This will come out next Tuesday.
Okay, so by that time, a special on the Fortress of Baileytude will have dropped with me and Shag talking about because as we record this on the 24th of August. Which isn't when we're recording this, but it's coming up, and that's when the episode's going to drop. 24th of August is the 25th anniversary of Superman number 82 coming out. That's kind of like the end of the reign of the Superman. So I wanted to kind of talk about it. I didn't get to do a 25th anniversary special of the death last year just because of life. But I really wanted something here, and to do something a little different, I had Shag on because he could talk about it from the retailer perspective, since he was working at a comic shop at the time. And I thought that would be a really important viewpoint to bring, because that's, as much as it's a story, it was also something that was sold. So the Death and Return of Superman is my favorite Superman story is Exile. Which is celebrating its 30th anniversary at the end of this year, mainly because that is when that was the story that solidified me as a Superman fan. That's it was a continued story. It brought in it bounced between the two Superman titles at the time, and I was 12, so there was like the perfect nexus to make you a nerd. But the Death and Return, just that whole era and that whole experience and everything surrounding it and all the ephemera that's come out with it. You know, there were 2 novelizations. There was an audio drama done by the BBC. You know, we've had countless action figure lines based on it. There were sequels. And it's just, to me, it was just this, it is my happy place with Superman, because I was fully entrenched by that point and I was ready for it as an event. So I liked Superman Doomsday too. I actually dug out, because I reviewed The Death of Superman for the homepage, the Superman homepage. When I was doing that, I was like, didn't I write a review for Superman Doomsday? And I looked at my archives and there it was. And I'm like, oh, I liked this movie. I remember liking the film, but I also remember being a little disappointed that it just felt like it felt like the Happy Meal version of it. And that's not saying it wasn't well done. It's just, it was so rushed. You know, he's dead by the end of Act 1. He's back at the end of Act 2. And then there's the big fight. And it's just, and Lex Luthor is wearing kryptonite gloves and beating up a clone. And what the heck is that all about? But watching this, I'm like, finally, they got it. They got what makes the story important. And it's not a big, huge throwdown with Superman and Doomsday. It's the story of the people in his life and who he is and his sacrifice. But I was watching it and I was like, okay, that happened in the comics. That happened in the comics. That happened in the comics. Okay, he's fighting the Justice League first. That's what happened in the comics, while Superman was off doing something else. And then when Superman finally got there, he stops the battle at one point to save that kid and his mother. Yeah. That happened during the storyline. I about busted out laughing when Lex Luthor walked into the LexCorp building wearing a red wig and beard. I was just like, that's a great nod. And it reminded me of when you read the story for the first time, and it's like, why does Lex Luthor have red hair?
There was some crazy stuff going on in that, I remember.
And it's funny that, because you are my go-to when people are like, well, why don't they just adapt it? I go, because someone's going to go, why did Supergirl turn to putty when he punched her in the face? Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. But they got it. And then in the aftermath, this is where I really, if I wasn't at work, I would have just busted into tears. There is the prayer Bibbo says at the end of the film, where he's talking to God. And he's like, why did you take him and not me? That is right out of Funeral for a Friend. And I'm like, they got it. They nailed it. And on a storytelling level, they introduced all of the other Supermen through the course of the film. So I'm just like, this is great. And look, there's the Excalibur, and there's Hank Henshaw, and there's Steel, voiced by Black Lightning. And there's, there's Superboy the clone sitting in Dabney Donovan's lab. And on the way out, he grabs the leather jacket. And I'm just like, this is all just, it made me feel good. Like watching this, even though it's incredibly emotional, even though that fight is wicked brutal, I'm just like, they finally translated on screen all of my feelings about why this story is amazing.
Yeah. And there are just, oh man, just the people-to-people interactions. Mm-hmm. The action is amazing, but when you break away from there, can it hold up and have that? And just, I really love that moment in the diner when he's revealing his secret and, she's laughing at him. I love when she says, oh my God, that's so unethical. You wrote about it yourself. But also when he said, I have one more secret, and then he had to run off and he left that little card about, saying, I love you. And at the very end, when she's trying to save him and it comes back to that and says, I got your note. I want you to know I love you too. And oh man, like willing to sacrifice. There are just some really beautiful character moments that I feel like I haven't seen in one of these DC films.
In a long time. Yeah. Like the Justice League felt like a team in this. Mm-hmm. And I love, and the funny thing is since they started doing, I watched War like 4 years ago. I still haven't watched Throne of Atlantis or Justice League versus Teen Titans. I have them. I'm looking at them right now, actually. but I haven't watched it. But since they started these films and I watched that first one, Rachel and I have kind of gotten into and out of and into, and we come back to it every once in a while, Criminal Minds.
Okay.
So I cannot not hear the dude from Criminal Minds as Cyborg. It's just so apparent that it's Shamar Moore, also of the Birds of Prey television series, by the way. But no, it's just I loved the interaction of the League and how, Barry's getting married.
Yeah.
And that brought into Superman's like, well, how do you share your life? And bringing the Kents in to come visit when it happens was also one of those brilliant storytelling things. Okay, that gets them in town, so we don't have to cut to them. Mm-hmm. And it's just you're absolutely right. It wasn't just the action, and it wasn't just the heart. It was the fact that they went out of their way to say this city loves Superman, and Superman has these weird relationships because he can't really be himself unless he's with the Kents. Mm-hmm. So it's like seeing him hanging out with the Justice League, and the joke is just like, I owe you one, Flash. You owe me like 30.
Yeah.
And hearing Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern again is just fantastic. There wasn't anything about this film outside of the fact that I don't like the New 52 costume as in an animated form. That was my one nitpick.
Yeah.
And even by the end, I'm like, it's not that bad.
Yeah. It turned out to be okay. And even my thought of, like, why are the Justice League in this turned out to be okay. Because they were there, but I think it clearly was a Superman film.
Oh, yeah. Doomsday annihilated them.
Yeah.
I mean, Wonder Woman held the line longest. Mm-hmm. And the only reason Batman survived is he didn't take him on toe-to-toe, which was something I was very impressed with. Because usually, if Batman's there, he's going to get the first shot in. But no, it's just like, oh, God, this thing's going to kill me. Flash goes down. Green Lantern goes down. Poor Hawkman. Mm-hmm. poor Hawkman. He just can't catch a break.
Yeah. First one gone.
And just the whole, Aquaman's got a personal stake in this because he killed some of the Atlantean guards. And I was just like, this was a very organic movie. Nothing felt like it was put in there just to be there. It all felt natural to the story.
Mm-hmm. I think the only connection, too, because I was concerned of why they couldn't just do a standalone, but really the only thing that connected it to the New 52 DC line with the direct-to-video is the fact that Clark and Diana had dated. Mm-hmm. And so they at least have that moment of, it was nice for a while, but they're not dating anymore. Because I did wonder with those costumes, wait a minute, I remember where they left that. So I was glad that they addressed that and didn't leave. Because that would have been a big hole that everyone would have caught on to, I'm sure.
And it was a very adult way of handling it, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, we had a relationship. Mm-hmm. We tried. We're better as friends.
Yeah.
And I thought, and that's why when they brought Lois in, as Rao intended, I was like, okay, everything, like, from what I understand of listening to some of the press junket stuff from San Diego, the producers originally weren't going to have it be New 52. It was going to be standalone, but somebody on some level pushed it.
I'm sure.
But I actually think that worked to its favor because it felt like there was a history there.
Okay.
Where you're just not coming into it. Now, I may not like how that history started because I think War is a pretty boring film.
Ooh, yeah.
I was not a fan of it.
No,
maybe I need to rewatch
Throne
it.
of Atlantis, though, is good. So, like, things get up from War. War was the worst, but it goes up.
Which is appropriate because I felt the same way about the comics. Okay. It's like I really wasn't into Lee and Johns' first arc, but when they did Throne of Atlantis, I'm like, okay, this is what we need. So
yeah,
I'm just excited.
Yeah. When does the next part come out? Do you know? You're in the know.
Early next year.
Early next year. Okay.
Yeah, like it's probably going to be like the February-March movie.
Okay.
Which because usually that's when they release about 4 a year, and it's seasonal. And so I'm just excited for it because I think they're going to, seeing the preview that they put on the Blu-ray that you can also find on YouTube. It's just like they're really getting it right, which is so important to me. And it shouldn't be this important to me, but it is.
Yeah. I think maybe I would really like to buy it because I just sort of rented it when I was watching it. So I might wait to see if they do the same thing that they did with Dark Knight or Dark Knight Returns rather, and see if they do like a bundle or have like an oversized and have both parts in together.
You know,
do you think they'll do it?
Well, okay. Warner Brothers Home Entertainment is not above re-releasing stuff 1,000 times. Sure. So on that level, I could see them doing it. I don't know if I'd buy it, but then again, I didn't have to buy this one, so that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
But no, the thing is, with Dark Knight Returns, I sat down and watched both parts back to back, and that was one of the most grueling experiences of my life. Just because it's just like, oh man, I need a break.
Yeah, I can see that.
So it was neat seeing it all as one long film, but I kind of think this one would play better on that because Dark Knight Returns is just an unrelentingly bleak story with kind of a heroic ending, whereas this is you have the death and then the reaction and then the next part. I think it plays better. I mean, you read all of the trades back to back, correct?
Correct.
So do you think that would have been better than just reading the death and then stopping and then coming back to the middle part and then coming back to
It was only better
return?
Because it remained in my mind. So all those details were together for me, so that's why I enjoy sometimes going through. I mean, I might not have done it bam, bam, bam. I may have had like a minor break because I certainly had to do that with the Nightfall trilogy with Batman because there's just so much. But it is nice. I don't want to take too much of a break between things because it's nice to remember details instead of going back and forgetting what has happened.
Yeah, Nightfall is one of those stories that you really want to kind of want to take a break after the first part. Maybe a little break after the second part. I think rolling into Night's End is easier because Night's End is only 8 parts or something, or 10 parts or something like that. Whereas Nightfall proper is like 6 months worth of comics. And then the other part was like it was like 6 months or so worth of comics as well. So, or at least that's what it felt like. I could go back and look at it and go, I'm completely wrong about this. But yeah, I can see what you're saying about that.
Yeah. Whew. Okay. Well, thanks for talking some Superman with me. I know that's painful for you sometimes.
I hate that character.
Man, that would be terrible. If you ever got to that point, what would you do?
Well, I walked away for about 10 months in 2010. Okay. So I came back because, much like in The Outsiders, there isn't going to be a Rumble without Dallas. You are not going to have an Action Comics Centennial issue without Mike.
Yeah. Oh, man. Whew. Okay. Well, now we're going to get into the main event. That was a warm-up.
Yes!
It was a warm-up. So we're going to do some No Man's Land. Let me explain how this is going to happen, and then the big question that I'd like to hear from Michael, since I've shared my history, is what your history is. So originally when they put these out, they had the 5 slimmer trades. And as far as I know, there are 100 total issues of No Man's Land. I say this because there's a website that I've gone to a couple times, and every time I go on there, an animation pops up and counts up to 100. So there are 100 issues, according to that website. And they missed a lot in the original printing of these little trades. Recently, as you had said, Michael, they had these new that are the complete edition, and they're a little bit thicker, but they have all of the issues. So what I'm doing is taking more or less the layout of the 5, so I can have 5 episodes, and then filling in the gaps with the ones that were taken out. This has worked sometimes. The first 2 episodes are pretty even, and then I think the 4th episode is a little insane with like 21 issues. So luckily Michael only had to do 12 or 13. But for more or less, I think it'll be okay. I don't know if I will have made a mistake until I'm reading these, but I think for the most part it should be okay. So if that makes sense, yeah?
It sounds like you've got a good handle on it because as you know, we're going to be discussing tonight.
Yeah.
they're like little 4-issue arcs.
Yeah.
Usually with one writer writing all 4 issues. So you're kind of getting a complete story by covering all 4 at once.
Right. Yep. So, yeah, I think this episode, it seems to have worked out. I'm still working on the next episode. But, yeah, I spent a couple hours like going through and seeing what could I put here, what could I not. So, overall, I think everything that we're about to cover was in probably the slim paperback, with the exception of the Azrael issues. And I think there was probably a reason why they left them out. Yes, they tie in, but are they crucial to the story? Not necessarily, and I think they might bring up a continuity issue, which we'll discuss, or at least some sort of conflict. But that's what's going on. If you're looking for the list, you can, when you downloaded this episode, in the info I actually put the list of what issues I will be covering, so you can check that out. But before we start, and I should also say, what's going to happen is, because I don't want to put poor Michael through recapping completely these 13 issues, I think. What's going to happen is I have given DC sort of solicitation, and then Michael will give significant moments that we may need to be aware of. And if Barbara appears, which actually she appeared a great deal in this episode, then what was she doing? And so what we'll do is we'll go through a couple issues that take up an arc. We'll talk about that arc. We'll move on to the next one, and then our overall thoughts on what's happening. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Okay. I'll probably have to repeat this all the time. I will always wonder how Shag consistently repeats the who's who stuff, and I guess I'll have to get real good. Maybe by part 5 I'll have it really down and everyone knows what's happening. So before we start recapping and talking about this, I did want to know your history. I'd be interested to know your history of Batman No Man's Land.
So back in the early 2000s, late 90s into early 2000s, I made this considered effort to get every Batman book. And when I say Batman book, I'm talking Batman, Detective, Legends of the Dark Knight, Shadow of the Bat, Catwoman. I already had pretty much full runs of Robin and Nightwing by that point. And so the idea was I was going to read, starting with the post-crisis stuff, I was just going to read through every Batman book there was from 1986 up until I started in 2003. And over the course of like a year or so, I read through all these books. I read, got through like the early post-crisis stuff, the introduction of Tim Drake, Nightfall, Contagion, Legacy, and reread Cataclysm because I dip in and out of Batman as a going concern, and Cataclysm I actually came back and stopped right before No Man's Land, so I never read it, even though it was only like 3 or 4 years old at that time. And I vividly remember sitting there when I got all the books together, and I'm like, I'm here. I'm gonna read No Man's Land finally, because I say I didn't read No Man's Land. That's kind of a lie. I stopped collecting the books right before No Man's Land, and I restarted buying the books at the end. So the first issue I got into, I think, was the one that has Lex Luthor on the cover. And I read that finale and that gut punch of an ending, and I was just like, now I get to read the whole thing. And it was kind of an emotional experience at the time, because No Man's Land really is both literally and figuratively the end of the 90s for Batman. Because it ran all the way through the course of 1999, pretty much. You had, like, everything that came before it kind of culminated in No Man's Land. And if they had just canceled Batman after this, I think it would have gone out on a high note.
Sure, yeah.
But then we get into the 2000s where things get really weird from time to time. But it was also just this, for me, it was just like getting it. It wasn't Christmas because it's a really dark and bleak story at times. But the first time I read No Man's Land was not the comics. And it's the same way with Nightfall. I missed out on Nightfall and Night's End and all that completely, but I read the novelization by Denny O'Neil, the summer of '94. And so when I saw there was a novelization of No Man's Land by this guy named Greg Rucka, who's that? I bought it and I devoured it. And the great thing, we don't get so much in the comics, but in that novel, you're like 40, 60 pages in before Batman shows up, and you don't care.
Yep.
You just don't care because you're just deep in with the characters that you've been introduced to. Mm-hmm. So by the time Batman gets there, it's like, oh, Batman's here. Oh, that's nice. That's good. Because it's a little more linear timeline-wise than the comics are. So postscript to that, I started reading Greg Rucka pretty heavily after that. I read the first 3 of his Atticus Kodiak books, and they're really, really good, and I recommend them highly. And started buying Detective Comics because of him. But No Man's Land is like one of those things where I'm just like, if someone's going to ask me what I think are some of the all-time best Batman stories, I just say No Man's Land, like the whole thing. Not just one part of No Man's Land, the whole thing. Because you have to read the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I enjoyed your story. Thank you. Okay, well, without further ado, shall we begin?
Yes. Am I supposed to do something?
You're supposed to, I guess, read the little...
oh, I'm reading it. I thought you said you were going to read it.
Oh,
okay,
no, this is your little job.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
You need to do that as an outtake at the end.
No, I think that'll stay in where it is, sir.
Okay, so everything starts with Batman No Man's Land number 1. The National Guard blocks all of the borders to Gotham to let no one in or out. Oracle develops a new network of agents and creates maps that lay out the territories of different factions and who controls them. This continues into Shadow of the Bat number 83, where Gotham falls into more chaos with Batman still missing. James Gordon takes his task force to regain control of the city sector by sector, but things don't go so well for Gordon when he runs into the street demons. I love the street demons. I've loved them since 1990 when they were introduced into the comics. No Law and a New Order continues into Batman number 563 with a simple overtag by the Blue Boys, who are the GCPD. A war broke out between the Low Boys and the Street Demons. After days of bloody combat, the Blue Boys simply walked in and claimed both territories, which include Police HQ and the Clock Tower, where some woman named Barbara lived.
Yeah.
Batman and Alfred returned to Gotham City, and after contacting Oracle, Batman ran into the new Batgirl. He told her he did not approve, but also did not disapprove, and ordered her not to disgrace the symbol. And Batman, No Law and a New Order ends in Detective Comics number 730. James Gordon, even after seeing the Bat Tech, continued trying to convince himself that Batman was gone. Batman infiltrates Scarface's gang, takes him down, and claims his territory.
Okay. What would you say of those were important moments that people would need to know if they weren't reading?
Okay, so the significant part outside of Batman's return to Gotham, because unlike the novel, which begins at the very beginning of No Man's Land, this begins almost 3 months in. So you're kind of, as you would lovingly say, in medias res.
I would lovingly say that. Thank you.
You're already in. So Batman returning doesn't have as much emotional punch because it's only been 2 issues basically until we see him again. But the important thing here is it establishes that Gotham is now under basically a fiefdom where different gangs, quote unquote, control different parts of the city. And one of the cool things that I love about these comics is that they have maps that show you who controls what territory.
Yes.
And those maps will shift as the story goes on. And the crucial part of this is it's kind of James Gordon wrestling with, am I a cop or am I somebody trying to regain control of a city? Because those are two very different roles. And we see within his group, as he's making these decisions, these very gray and morally ambiguous decisions, that there are people that want to go more brutal and there are people that want to do less brutal. So you got William Pettit, who was one of the SWAT guys, who's constantly like, "No, Jim, we got to do everything. We've got to go in there and we've got to kill everybody, basically." Mm-hmm. And then you have guys like Foley going, "Why are we doing this?" And one of my favorite parts is someone's like, Bach is just like, "I think you've got an ulterior motive here." He's like, "What do you mean?" "Well, your daughter's in that section." He's like, I won't deny that at all. And I love that moment where it's just Gordon going, no, we're doing this because we need to do it, but we're also doing it because I want to go take care of my daughter.
Sure.
So the fact that they basically incite a war between the low boys and the street demons, and those people are killing each other. It's not dudes with sticks and bats and stuff like beating each other, and at the end of the fight they all go to their different corners and get better and then come back and fight. No, they are killing each other. Mm-hmm. And it kind of, in Oracle's narration through it, kind of illustrates this fact. At one point, it's one of the things that sticks out of my mind, is both the low boys and the street demons were burning their own dead, claiming it was their enemy, and then going, basically house by house or home by home, and convincing the people in their area. It's just like, if you let the low boys or the street demons in here, they're cannibals. They're going to kill you. We're your only protection. And basically they weaken each other to the point where the blue boys can come in and just take over. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, you've got a new Batgirl. You've got Batman returning, but not understanding the city anymore. Mm-hmm. So you've got Batman kind of on the back foot. And I think it just beautifully sets up the world that Gotham now is, and shows that even if you have one of the main bad guys, who is Scarface, who tried to take advantage of Cataclysm, by the way.
Yep.
They can be taken out, and lines are going to move, and people are going to make some really what might in other contexts be immoral decisions, but it makes sense for the world that they're living in now. Mm-hmm. So those are my big takeaways from this. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it really sets up that something is absolutely different because you see how Jim is acting. I think that's sort of the first clue that something is amiss, and you have to live in this world as potentially the gangs that you fought against in the past. I think his methods are a little bit shady, and he questions it even to Sarah and considers it and tries to hold some sort of line, but it is really difficult. But they're acting just like a street gang, and you were talking about how the low boys and the demons were shouting up to people, but also the blue boys were doing that as well. Like, we're here to protect you, and so everyone's trying to gain the territory and survive, and they all have their different motives, but you almost have to just blend in with the scenery. And then even Batman, I felt, was pushing it a little bit, because he did let that guy fall into the water and get blown up by the mine.
Yeah.
And I realized that Alfred was dangling, but I'm sure he probably could have caught both of them. But, he is, it's just really, a really stark contrast to what it was like previously. You've brought up a bunch of stuff, and I want to go off of what you had said, but we'll start with Scarface.
Yes.
He was, in fact, the man behind. I remember Josh was on and was asking, did I recognize who it was? And even when I was reading Cataclysm, I recognized that the way he was speaking was a clue, but I couldn't think of who it was. But why do you think there's a connection with Cataclysm here? Why do you think Scarface was the first sort of big bad that was taken out in this overall story?
If I had to take a guess, because I don't have an in-story reason.
Sure.
But I think they are taking the villains as kind of a hierarchy.
Okay.
Whereas Scarface in the 90s was kind of a big deal, mostly because I think he was on the animated series. But also he was one of Alan Grant's pet characters.
Okay.
I think starting with him, you have a recognizable bad guy, right? Who is trying to live in this new reality that Gotham, post, being part of the United States exists in. So having him there, you have a recognizable character, but you're not going to start with Two-Face. You're not going to start with the Joker. Penguin's involved, but Penguin's a background character in just about all of these stories. I think he's a good backbone character because he's doing what Penguin or the Penguin of this era would do, which is I've got connections and stuff, and I'm just going to live my life. And I'm going to control my territory. I'm going to line my nest, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think having him there, you have not a C-list villain, but not the Joker.
Sure.
To start things off with.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're a bit smaller to potentially start off with, and really the threat with him, I would say, is more the goons that he has surrounding him rather than, the puppet himself. But I think it is a nice nod to Cataclysm because he was preying on the people there, so it's almost like a direct little bridge from that story to this one that I liked that they set him up first. But it could have potentially been anyone. But I think with Penguin, I'm glad how they set him up because they're setting up this mystery of his pipeline, and we'll see throughout that he keeps popping up. So he is a nice little anchor character that keeps coming in and could be used for good or for bad. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Barbara Gordon is known as a chronicler here, which I like because of how she's journaling and keeping track of everything. I also like that she has contingency plans, which she made first because of Contagion way back when, so you get to know her very much as a planner. And we also get to see how she gets her information, which sets things up later, I would say. But do you think in this arc that she plays a pretty big... No, that's not the best question to ask. How would you say she ranks character-wise in No Man's Land?
It's hard for me to separate the comic story and the novel.
Oh, very
She's
true.
one of the narrators.
Yep.
So I will always consider her to be integral to the story.
Okay.
Even when she's not as big a player, I love... There's a moment in the second story we're going to be talking about where she basically says, I am a high-tech girl in a low-tech world.
Yeah.
So she has her helpers, and she has her like her little army of informants, and I love how they explain they're getting their information to her. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's not like it was before, where she would just climb onto the internet, even in the 90s, and just find out anything she needs to find out. Mm-hmm. It's a different world for her, and she's trapped because there's no electricity.
Sure.
So getting up and down her building, that ain't easy.
Yeah.
So the fact when Gordon comes to get her and he brings her downstairs when she, spray paints the GCPD thing.
Yep.
I was just like, that's probably the first time she's been out of that place since No Man's Land started.
Yeah, most likely.
So I love Barbara. So I can never not think of her as a big player in the Batman world. I think there are stories where she is not as big of a part of it, but to establish things, she is absolutely essential to this these 4 issues.
And I think she's great for the reader to catch them up and to give biased as well as, I think, non-biased views of what's happening. And it involves, I think, the Blue Boy, she's probably biased, but just the state of things and what's going on and how people got out or didn't get out and how humanity has fallen, things like that. I think she's great to learn. Whereas, instead of having info dumps, I think we're getting some of that, but it's done really well as a narration from someone that we care about.
Well, on a technical writing level, you have to establish this world. And having her be that person to establish it, it doesn't feel like, clunky exposition.
Yeah.
Because you're interested, because it's coming from someone you like.
Yep.
And, we haven't talked about it yet. This was written by Bob Gale, who is, I think, most famous for writing the Back to the Future film. But this was this was the time when Hollywood started coming into comics a little more. And if you read the individual issues, Denny O'Neil in his little introduction is from the Den, which was his column in the letters column. is basically like Bob Gale came in and tightened everything up. Because behind the scenes, this was a departure from what the Batman books had been doing. For the bulk of the 90s, it was Chuck Dixon on Detective, Doug Mensch on Batman, and Alan Grant on Batman Shadow of the Bat and Legends of the Dark Knight, which crosses into the series eventually, into the storyline eventually, was written by a bunch of different writers. It was a different creative team for every story arc. So now, this storyline's written by Bob Gale. The next storyline is written by Devin Grayson. So it was also a time when they were bringing in new blood, and Greg Rucka comes onto the Batman books at this point as well. So it's kind of interesting that you had these three writers basically setting the table for most of the decade, and now other people are coming in and serving the meal. And I think that actually, I was not. I didn't like the art. Alex Maleev, I think, is a very talented artist. I don't think he was quite right for this story arc. Because the art to me gets a little muddy at times. But it wasn't bad, so I don't want to ping it too much. But creatively, I think it did everything it needed to set up what this storyline is going to be and what the stakes are for the people of Gotham.
Yeah. I think there's no one as capable as Barbara, because I'm just imagining someone else in that role, and would they, if they were so attuned to technology and so connected to it, would they have been able to transition as well as she did? And even she recognizes that she was out of her depths to a certain extent, but she's able to capitalize on what she knows, and I think she's very smart with her messengers, and we see that she lies to them a little bit, where she says, there's a stock of food somewhere, but there's poison, and so you've got to bring it back to me or get me this information, and I'll give you an antidote or something like that. And so of course there's not really, but it's a way to, I think, get some loyalty and trust, and also get that information instead of people running around. And she's helping people out. They're helping her, but she's also helping them, and this is going to be huge once we introduce a certain Asian character that Donovan loves. But yeah, I'm so happy to see her in this, and I think, there, I guess, is the next arc, right, with the Fear, that we don't really see her at all, and that's fine. She doesn't need to be everywhere, but I think when she is, she's really utilized well, and of course Batman is as annoying as ever because he just pops on to, talk to her. I don't know if it was in this arc or later on, but he pops on to talk to her and says that he's back. Oh, it must have been this arc, and then pops off when she's trying to reply to him. But yeah, so I'm just glad to see her. But we'll talk about her again, especially with Azrael, because there's some big stuff going on. I want to talk about the female Batgirl. At the time, did you know who she was? No, we didn't know who she was yet. Okay.
I wasn't reading the books, but I remember that being something people were talking about. Because and they weren't quite sure who she was, and of course that changes. Right. So you have that, and I think they're really good about keeping that mystery alive and kind of throwing you off the trail. I like that you can't do that live action, and you can't do that in the audio drama because it's obvious who it is if you're paying attention. But here it's just okay, there's a new Batgirl, and I remember seeing that cover of her swinging through the city on the stands, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of an interesting look. It's she's completely covered, so it could be anybody under there.
Yep. I also think that it was hidden really well. I don't know that I knew who it was when I was reading it the first time, but even now, knowing, then you're looking, and once you find out who it really is, you think about the times that they both appeared, maybe in the same issue. Yeah. And so it's really deftly done. I do wonder, though, given the fact that she was around, and I do realize I was redundant, I said the female Batgirl before, so there you go. But given the fact that she was around while the real Batman was not, I did little quotes, why do you think she would bow to him, in a sense, and even suggest that, she could take off the costume if it displeased him? What's going on with that?
I think we're getting into who she is.
Okay.
and what her place is in Batman's world. I don't know if you're wanting to give it away right now.
I don't know either,
hidden,
but that's interesting because I disagree with you, because you think the other character, who she is, would bow to Batman after all of the stuff that she's done?
I think deep down she would. I think deep down she wants nothing more than to have his blessing.
Okay.
I don't see that as a weakness on her part.
Sure.
Because she's a very strong character.
Yeah.
But she's also a very proud character, and basically getting Batman's approval means that she won.
Okay.
You know, if she's able to convince him that she's quote unquote worthy, I think there's a part of her that wants that desperately. But so she's trying to play in his world, you know, by adopting his costume and creating the bat tags, which I don't know if we talked about much. Every gang basically has their own glyph that they spray paint on their territory, you know, and she's spray painting bats throughout it. And this creates kind of a thing where Jim Gordon, you know, in the first issue, somebody basically does a makeshift bat signal and he destroys it. Because and I think this is actually done a little better in the novel than it is in the comics. And I think it's because just of the nature of how the storytelling in the comics is. We're going to be talking about something in the Azrael thing that completely negates the importance of something that comes later. Where I'm like, oh, they're dealing with that now? That's really stupid. So you have James Gordon like wanting to get, you know, doesn't believe that Batman's back, doesn't believe the tags. So when Batman shows up, she's like, okay, I'm going to try playing it this way. But the thing is that she is in the story as another character. So I think there's a bit of struggle in her about what she really wants to do, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. We can assume, don't you think, that he knows right away who it is?
Oh, he knows exactly who it is.
Okay. So that's interesting then, given the history, that he would even allow it. Do you think he's just desperate for bodies right now?
I think the point of this story to me has always been, this is Batman taking all of the lessons he's learned since Nightfall and finally realizing what they are. Batman at this point in the comics was getting more, I'm going to use a term that's not quite 100% correct, but I think it also is very fitting. He's more militaristic. This is a war. Robin, Nightwing, Oracle, they are his soldiers. And you have to, and you either live up to his expectation or you get on the bus, essentially. And what we figure out in this first storyline is he's trying to do it all on his own. In the first issue, there's a scene where Oracle momentarily contacts all of the other people that are Bat characters. And, you know, basically they're all like, you know, well, he told us to stay away. So the fact that Batgirl is there, I think he's using her because she is at that point more knowledgeable of the no man's land than he is.
Yeah. She's
been carrying on the fight. It's like the tags. I intend to adopt it. You know, that kind of thing. Though there is a scene, though, quick digression, which, because it all comes back to Superman. When we see Nightwing, Superman's in the background. And if you read this for the first time and go, why is Superman there? During this month.
Yeah, there's that Nightwing issue, right?
Yes, but Superman's everywhere. Because of the storyline going on in Superman at the time. He is trying to basically, he's kind of given up being Clark Kent, and he's monitoring the entire planet. So he guest stars in Titans and Impulse and Robin, but the Nightwing one is the best one because it's written by Chuck Dixon. And so, in fact, if you have the individual issue, in the back it shows that Nightwing issue with Superman on the cover. But yeah, it's kind of funny that now I can place this story as happening during that story, which the continuity wonk in me kind of goes, wee. But you know, I think this storyline for Batman is him learning that he can't do everything on his own. That he needs his team, and he needs to get that stick out of his rectum. So the fact that she's already there is the only reason he accepts her.
And didn't he have a conversation with Alfred on the bridge, or maybe it was in the tunnel, in regards to, wasn't Alfred saying you said you would never do that again, like be solo, that sort of thing?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I think even you're absolutely right. I think he recognized that was just poor form, that he tried to go out on his own. So he needs to have some people, which is good. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, and he really gets to that about halfway into the story, into No Man's Land as a whole. Right now, we're just in the early days. We're just getting everything started.
We sure are.
And I think this story does a really good job of doing that.
My final question on this arc is, if you were Jim Gordon, would you trust Batman ever again?
If I was Jim Gordon, I don't know if I trust Batman in the first place. No, I think Jim is in the same position Batman is in. I think they are flip sides of the same coin. So Jim has a chip on his shoulder because he's relied on Batman, and now for 3 months, Batman hasn't been there when he needs him the most. If Batman had stayed in No Man's Land from the very beginning and he and Jim had planned things out, I think Jim wouldn't have the problems that he does. But there's a line in the novel where Sarah Essen's talking to Montoya, and she says he's feeling not irrationally that he's been abandoned. And Jim, and we talked about it before, but it bears repeating. Jim's doing some really shady things here. Yep. He is giving in to baser instincts and doing things that he could never do as a cop. You could never get two street gangs to kill each other in a major metropolitan area and have that be legal.
Yeah.
There would be ramifications, but because there is no law, and I think one of the things this opening arc does well is that it spends its first few pages showing people trying to get into Gotham and being turned away. So we start on the outside and move our way in, which gives us a sense that Gotham really is cut off from the rest of the world now. Which I don't think is even remotely constitutional, but that's entirely beside.
Oh, well, I mean, Nick Scratch did all that stuff, so.
Yeah.
I think, I feel bad for Jim, but it's one of those, once burned, twice shy situations, because he felt betrayed when Batman left. I'm trying to think here. When was it? Oh, yeah, it was during Nightfall, because because Nightwing, Dick was in the suit, and he knew, and he just felt lied to and betrayed. So, he's felt betrayed again because he left. And I don't know if he, at this point in time, considers him his closest friend, because we've seen in some iterations that that's true, but to have that happen and have Batman be nowhere, I absolutely see all these emotional reactions that Jim goes through, especially with the destroying of that remade Batman signal.
I think Gordon is another one of those things Batman has to learn about. Because Batman is always... The 90s Batman operated under the premise of, my stuff's more important than your stuff.
Sure.
You are here to serve my goals. So they're friends, but it's a really... Batman is basically the guy that comes over and gets anything he needs from you. Like he gets like borrows $5 or drinks all your soda or mooches off of you for food, and then is just gone and doesn't tell you what he's planning, and then expects you to be there at the drop of a hat. That is their friendship.
Yeah. Oh, man. I do remember, I can't remember when it's coming up, but that silent issue when Batman pops into his little backyard. That's a very, that's a big one.
Yes, it is.
Well, before we give a nice little rating of the No Law and a New Order arc, I will say that I realized when I was reading this that the street demons are the very same street demons that popped up in the recent Batgirl 24. I didn't really recognize, because it had been so long, that they were the same people, so that was a good nod back to them. So, Michael, what would you give this, I guess the 4 issues, right? And then the introduction? Or is it 3 issues? 4 total issues.
It's the special and the 3 regular books, yes.
Yeah.
Are we doing out of 10 or out of 5?
Out of 10.
I will give it an 8.
Okay.
I think it does a good job of setting up the world. I liked the character moments. It's just the art drags it down a little bit for me.
Okay. I didn't have... Normally I have problems with the Batman Chronicles art, so I don't know when I get to that whether I'll like it or not. But overall, I actually enjoyed the art. And I think I'm actually going to step you up, raise you a little bit, and say 9. I think it absolutely does a wonderful job of setting things up, setting up some mysteries, putting Oracle in a good place, casting some doubt on characters that you would think would be good and wholly true to their natures, and just setting you in this world that now you're like, oh dear, these are the stakes and this is what's going to happen. And also I think pointing to people that you know are going to snap over, so there are nice hints that are set up for you. Well, the next arc is Fear of Faith, so how about you give us our publisher summaries there?
Fear of Faith begins in Batman Legends of the Dark Knight number 116. This is a new chapter of the No Man's Land saga, which begins with Fear of Faith, as I just said.
Yeah.
Chaos continues to reign in Gotham City as citizens stand huddled in fear. And when fear comes into play, the Scarecrow isn't far behind. This continues into Shadow of the Bat number 84. Scarecrow ends up in the Fallout shelter and finds the weapons that Father Christian, who has basically his own little island in Gotham City, that Gordon and his men are trying to basically say, you need to let us in because you need your protection. But Father Christian is storing weapons for the Penguin in exchange for food. Scarecrow lets all the gangs know about these hidden weapons. This goes into Batman number 564, where the Scarecrow continues his sick experiment in mind games in the Arc Project Refugee Center and attempts to cause a riot among the people. And finally, in Detective Comics number 731, a firefight breaks out. Penguin's men killed the False-Face gang and grabbed Father Sounder. With the GCPD nearing, Batman ended the skirmish. Scarecrow was fingered as the instigator, but the Huntress turns the tables on him with pity. He let the refugee camp discouraged and burned his outfit. Father Sounder helped everyone drop the weapons off a bridge, and Batman took Batgirl to one of his caves.
Yes, but not for a romantic rendezvous.
Yes, that only happens on rooftops for Batman.
Oh, that's true. As a note, there's no Oracle in this arc, so just be aware of that. So what would you say significant moments would be for people to know?
It's kind of funny because this is an interesting storyline. I think it kind of dove into the mindset of people in Gotham City. But you could take this out and it doesn't matter. So the significant parts are any significant parts that we talk about is only significant to this story. There is nothing in here that furthers the No Man's Land story as a whole. So significant to this story is that you have these two priests who have set up a refugee center that takes people of all faiths. And the Scarecrow has basically come in to play his mind games with everybody. And the Huntress is there to stop him, essentially. So those are the important parts. The Penguin plays a major part in the story as he basically gives the weapons over to Father Christian to hide in his basement, because it's the one place that no one will look for them. No one will think that there's a cache of weapons in the bottom of what is essentially a refugee center.
Sure.
And the reason why he doesn't let the Father Christian and Father Sounder don't let the cops in is because they have illegal immigrants and people who are refugees from war-torn countries, and basically letting the police in would make them feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So it's like, we got this. Gordon doesn't buy that. And so what you really have is kind of an interesting, not so much a morality play, but mind games on the part of the Scarecrow, which results in the former false facers against the Penguin's gang, against the cops, against Batman and the Huntress.
Yep.
And so on that level, it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I cannot stress enough, you could completely ignore this story and not miss anything important.
Sure. Yep. I think with this, though, it is interesting to get almost an inside glimpse into the gangs through the eyes of one of the members, because there is a redemption. I can't remember who that guy's name is now. But
yeah, there's like 15 names for those false facers, and I couldn't keep them straight either.
So there was one that left that gang and was helping out with the father, because he just realized some bad stuff was going down. He's like, I can't do this, and I think he was thinking of his mother a lot. He didn't want her to sort of look down on him, and then he was convinced by the Scarecrow to go back because the father needed help, and that was a lie, and he gets beat up and things like that. But you get to see what it would be like to be a gang member at this point in time, as well as that it is possible, despite it being really terrible place right now, that there are redeemable qualities in people, and that you could potentially still be redeemed, which I think goes along with that religious message that they had throughout this little arc.
Yeah, this arc really begins when the Scarecrow notices that people are burning books, but they refuse to burn the Holy Bible.
Right.
And I think in his mind, that's like ooh, I can play with that. Because there's Devin Grayson does a really great job in writing this story, in dealing with some very complex issues and exploring them just right. She doesn't leave anything out, but she also doesn't get lost in it either. I was very impressed with her script, because the Scarecrow is a master manipulator, and all throughout the story he is just playing people against each other.
Yep.
And the only one he doesn't have any control over is the Huntress, who wants him out of there immediately. And of course, Father Christian's like, all men are welcomed here. And at that point, I just look at the story and go, "You're an idiot. I know this is a different world, but that man is dangerous, and he has no business being here."
And it's also odd, because I would say that he doesn't trust Huntress as much. So there's like this weird contrast that you couldn't have predicted, where Scarecrow is trusted but Huntress is not.
And then Father Christian goes through his own kind of moral ambiguity, much like Gordon in the previous story, is that he accepts these weapons
at gunpoint.
But he only does it to bring food and supplies to his people, the people he's taking care of. And it's only because the Scarecrow finds out about this that anything goes bad. If nobody knew and those weapons were just there, now the Penguin probably would have exerted more and more control over him over time. But really and truly, if the Scarecrow hadn't done anything and he had done this, those weapons would have just sat in that fallout shelter and no one would have been the wiser.
It's probably true. Yep. Until Penguin came a-calling.
Yes, and wanted his weapons back, which probably, again, would have ended very bloody, but... Yeah. I like the Penguin in this, and I kind of like Batman dealing with the Penguin, because at one point the Batman threatens that he has this EMP device that would wipe out all of Penguin's, lights and stuff and his generators, and Penguin, he leaves, and Penguin desperately grabs it, and it's just this cheap timer.
Yep.
It doesn't do anything. I also think it's funny that at one point Batman, when fighting the bad guys, uses his spray paint, or what looks like spray paint, to spray purple stuff in their face. I don't know if that's supposed to be like mace or tear gas, but to me it looks like a spray paint can.
Maybe that's what he had on his tagging instruments.
Yeah, that's kind of what I got out of it, is that he was just using that as a weapon.
Yeah.
But it's not a bad story. I was banging on about the fact that you can take it out.
Sure.
This is not mentioned at all in the novel.
No.
A lot of what we saw in the first arc is in the novel eventually. It's not there at the beginning, but it's there eventually.
So do you think that Scarecrow is more or less disposable in this story?
Oh, yeah. He's completely disposable, but not in a bad way.
Yeah.
He serves his function within the story, but seeing him burn his costume at the end and kind of lose his identity for a little bit, that's a good kind of arc for him. That he basically took this messianic thing as far as he could.
Yeah.
I do love, though, that Father Christian is total 90s priest. He's wearing, it's almost like he's wearing like a white sport coat. He's got the long hair. The old guy, the guy in the wheelchair, Father Sounder, he's kind of the older guard of priest. So And Huntress is Catholic, and I think that's kind of essential of why she's so deferential to the priests.
Absolutely.
I think.
Yeah.
I think religion plays a part in this story, but again, he doesn't get lost in it, or Devin Grayson doesn't get lost in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important, and I had to ask myself, if you are cold and you need something, would the Bible be the thing you leave out? And for a lot of people, I think it would be.
Yeah.
And I think somebody else would just grab it and chuck it in there because they're like, no, I want to be warm, just because their faith isn't as devout as other people's.
Yeah.
But I liked this story. I see it as, I don't want to call it a placeholder. I don't want to call it as filler. Because I think they were really, they had a year to tell this story. Like you said, they have 100 books to go through.
Yep.
This is just 4 of them. So it's kind of a nice little sidestep.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it helps develop the Huntress character to see what she is doing in No Man's Land?
Yes, I think that's probably its main function.
Okay.
Because remember, Devin Grayson is the one that wrote the Huntress Nightwing miniseries that you love so much.
Wow, they shack up. I think it's been a while.
Yeah. No, they played board games all night.
Yeah, sure. But then Nightwing later on says it was a mistake, but that in his Unreal series. But I guess they get back together again in this, so should be interesting talking about that continuity-wise. I wonder if the priests potentially didn't trust her because they've heard her confessions, and how ethical that might be. Because I think there is a mention to that about how, I've heard your confessions before, and so are they judging her character through all of that, and that's why they don't trust her?
It's funny that this subject comes up now because I'm having my own. I won't get into it because it's not the forum for this, but I'm having my own kind of problems with the Catholic Church right now, and how they're dealing with a problem. I think positive steps are being taken, but I think it's way too late. And the subject a year ago came up of confession. And what confession is. And for those of you that are not familiar with Catholicism, confession is a sacrament. There's basically a set of sacraments you go through your life, beginning with baptism when you're born. And the next one is reconciliation. And it serves 2 purposes. One, when you have gone to confession and confessed your sins to the priest, and the priest gives you a penance to serve. Usually it's saying prayers. You can then go to the next sacrament, which is communion, where you take in, depending on the church, either the body or the body and the blood of Christ in the form of these little unleavened bread wafers that are terrible. When my mother went to church when she was a little kid, so this is like the 50s.
Sure.
They told her that if she bit into it, it would bleed inside her mouth.
Wow. So
it used to be a lot more hardcore with the Catholic Church. So they never told me that. I probably would have cried. But the other thing is that with confession, you confess your sins, the priest absolves you of it, and your soul is clean and you can go to heaven. So if you get out of confession, this is theoretical, mind you. If you get out of confession, do your penance, walk outside, get hit by a car, and die, you've got a good. You're already up. You're going to the good place. So, but the thing is that to a priest, the confessional is sacred. They don't reveal. They are not supposed. Okay, let me put it this way: they're not supposed to reveal what people have told them,
right?
Because there's a trust there. If priests, and this is something that comes up on Law and Order all the time, if you watch old episodes of Law and Order, where a priest has heard something and they're trying to get around that confessional rule because courts will side with the priests because of the First Amendment, and they don't want to set that precedent. But also, and I do kind of agree with this, even though I'm hard on the church, is that if someone feels like they go to a priest and the priest is going to blab what they say, there's no trust there. So this priest, I say all that to say this priest going, I've heard your confession, that guy's a jerk. Because he is basically suggesting to people that she's confessed things to him, and if she went to confession and he absolved her of her sins, then that's it. So I had a serious problem with that scene.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was too much. I apologize.
No, I mean, it's good to give people a sense of what, that all means. I mean, as you said, religion is very important to Helena, and so I think it's good to get some background on what Catholicism is. And, I just wonder about that, because she's trying to do the right thing here, but he's got this... I guess he knows the stuff that she's been doing, which potentially could be murder. We do know that she's been brutal, and so he doesn't know anything personally about Scarecrow, and he's just taking it for granted that probably trust the one that he hasn't seen any bad from and distrust the one that he knows that to be true. But it is, I guess it's hard. I guess that's the human side of us where we can't separate ourselves from what we hear, but you would think she'd get the benefit of the doubt.
I was going to say that because, as much as I am personally hard on most organized religion in general, the reason why I'm hard on it is because it's made up of people. And people will stray, people will fall,
sure,
people will sin, and people will do terrible things. But a priest, as much as he is an agent of God, a priest is also a person. And because of that, they're fallible. So he's not supposed to do it. Sure. He does it. It makes him a jerk. But it's also what makes him human.
Yeah.
So, and Father Christian, Father Christian basically makes a deal with the devil to protect his people.
Yep.
So what happens after that? Do they trust him after that? He put their lives in danger. So it's just it's the more you dig into this story, the more interesting it is.
Yep, very true. And it was hard to watch too with Scarecrow convincing these people that they need to take up arms and go out there. And you would think, please think about what this guy's saying. And it's hard to imagine people being so swayed, but I guess that's just people, that they would be in this hostile situation.
That's actually the most realistic thing about this story to me. It's not that I have a dim view of humanity.
Sure.
I just, it's funny where my philosophies come from. And my philosophy on people comes from Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black.
Oh.
He's like, a person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, and stupid. And what I mean by that is a person individually, pretty good. You get a group together, that's when things get weird, because sociologically we are a people that like to form tribes. Cults are there for a reason, and the Scarecrow has been basically brainwashing these people over weeks.
Yeah.
He's not just been sitting there biding his time. He's been working. And he's been working because he understands human psychology, and he knows he can manipulate these people because these people are hungry, they're scared, and they just want somebody to take care of them. So what he's giving them is a boogeyman. He's giving them somebody to hate. And so he's playing on that. And when you have that powder keg of people that are in a desperate situation, seeking some way out of it or some togetherness, and then you give them an enemy, on some level they'll go, if I kill this enemy, my life will be better and things will be better. So yeah, it was just brutal at the end that he just kept picking at them, and Huntress is like, stop listening to him.
Yeah.
And I have to say that if I was the Huntress in that situation, I would have put an arrow through his head in a heartbeat.
Yeah. She shows a lot of self-control in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's trying to do it Batman's way.
Yep, she sure is. Do you trust Huntress?
I would absolutely trust Huntress.
Okay.
You know why? Because Huntress is honest.
Mm-hmm.
Huntress, if Huntress says she's going to be there, she's going to be there. And if Huntress tells you she doesn't want to do it, she's not going to do it. And I trust that type of person. I love Helena, though. You got to understand that. I have loved her since I really got into the Bat books in the 90s. I think she is a fascinating character. I know there are people that loved the daughter of Catwoman and Batman, Huntress, and I think she's a great character too. But there are so many facets to this character. She's the daughter of a mobster who watched her family get killed by other mobsters, and that's what drives her. And she was the harder edge to Batman when she was introduced. And the fact that they didn't get along at first was great. And her ending in this story, No Man's Land in general, is beautiful. It is just amazing. I love Helena. I will say I prefer her in the costume she's in this story as opposed to the midriff exposed costume she would be in like 2003, because that's not practical. Yeah, I have a lot of time for Helena Bertinelli.
Do you agree with the majority of people who say that it makes sense that Batman doesn't trust her? Yes, and I say that because I can climb into Batman's head. And Batman is very rigid. You know, we were talking about this before. Everyone's a soldier to him, and they need to do things his way, because this is a war. And in this war, you don't kill. So the fact that the Huntress is willing to go down that road, he can't trust her. Okay. I try to defend her, but people, Don and Josh are always against me. Well, I've got your back in this case. I appreciate that. Yeah. I think I know just about as much as they do about these characters, so I could be wrong. I'm willing to concede that. I'm never going to claim to be the expert. Sure. But I think I can hold my own with those two. I always liked the fact that Tim reaches out to her a lot, tries to broker the peace. And I think that's another thing, is that Tim's got a different perspective of this, and also Tim has worked with her. Yeah. So it's not so, Batman's kind of off on his own, and, he pulls in his, his sidekicks when he wants to. That Cry for Huntress miniseries was actually really good. And I think it formed a bond between those two. Plus, he's a 15-year-old girl, and he's a 15-year-old kid. What? Sorry. I didn't know that. He's like a 15, 16-year-old kid, sure. And she's a hot young 20-something. So, oh gosh, you think she's a young 20-something? I think she's in her like probably mid-20s. Do you think Barbara's older than she is? She would have to be at this point. That's interesting. Okay, she's a She is a teacher. Yeah, I get that. But you could be a teacher at 22. Yeah, so that's true. I mean, it's not hard being a teacher, basically. Well, no, okay. That was me. Try that again. And to be fair, I just got done with back to school at my job, where I try to side with the teachers, and they still end up pissing me off. Oh, dear. So being a teacher is not easy. Being a teacher is probably one of the hardest jobs there is out there, and I will actually defend teacher to parents that are complaining. I'll never forget the look on this one woman's face. She's like, I don't understand why I have to pay for all this stuff. I go, well, you need to pay more property taxes then. Oh. And she just looked at me. What? I was like, property taxes go to schools. If you paid more in property taxes, the schools would have more money to allocate to supplies. They don't, so here's your list. Oh. So now so I apologize. God, Tom's never going to speak to me again. Yeah, well, yikes, yeah. My final thing is just the Leslie and Bruce moment. One of my favorite parts, I think, in this story, just hugging Leslie. I'm going to do that. Leslie, I think it's probably Leslie. My boss's name is Leslie. She prefers that one. So Leslie, tells him to basically slow down, takes off his mask, and then they hug, and then there's a discussion regarding why they each stayed, and I thought that in the midst of all this stuff that was going on, that was a very beautiful human moment to have between the two of them. Yeah, I like this Leslie Tompkins and not the other one that we see later that does something terrible. Dear. To Stephanie? Yes. I have yet to read that, actually. Isn't that funny? It's funny that you mentioned this, because it's going to come out in a couple months, because we're kind of far ahead. But Andy and I on the Overlooked Dark Knight, we've taken to starting the episodes with questions from listeners. Oh, sure. Just to, it's like, what do you think of this? And one of them was, do you prefer Leslie Tompkins as just being in There's No Hope in Crime Alley and Never Seen Again, or always around? And our answer, which I won't reveal here because tease, but
my answer was heavily weighed in on because of what eventually happens.
I see.
Where I think they ruined her as a character. I'm still mad about it, and I shouldn't be.
Oh dear, years later. Yeah. Well, no wonder you gave up Batman comics.
That was around the time I stopped collecting for a little while, so that makes perfect sense.
Okay, well, of the Fear of Faith arc, those 4 issues, what would you give it?
I'm actually going to give it a slightly higher rating in and of itself because I liked the art and I liked the writing. The only reason I'm giving it a 9 and not a 10 is that in the whole of No Man's Land, it doesn't really play a huge part.
Sure.
But you can't have it happen outside of No Man's Land at the same time.
Yeah. It wouldn't make sense context-wise. Yeah. And that's funny. I'm going to flip-flop and give it slightly lower. I'm going to say maybe... I'm going to give it an 8, I think, this time. I think there are some really great moments. I think especially getting to know Huntress and what her role is in No Man's Land, and of course that beautiful moment that I saw before. But I didn't care as much for those. Maybe it was just rubbing me the wrong way, since I'm one of those religious people that you talked about. But it was hard to read, and I was like really having a problem watching it all go down. I absolutely understand why it was going down, but it was hard to read. And I just wanted Scarecrow out of there, and I couldn't believe that they were trusting Scarecrow but not Huntress and all that stuff. So I'll give it a slightly lower grade. Okay, well, our last section, we'll call it the Azrael arc, which is really made up of a couple different stories, but they all go together and they all have Azrael. So lead us through this last batch.
Alrighty. This is what we would call ancillary No Man's Land.
Sure.
And then this was the thing that for the first half of it, most of the Bat titles were just kind of doing their own thing. Azrael was one of the few that was kind of involved from the beginning, and he got a snazzy new outfit.
He sure did.
In Azrael 51, hot on Nick Scratch's trail, Jean-Paul is struck by the limitations left years after relying on his old suit's gifts, and he's also struck by lightning. In Azrael 52, Azrael ventures back into the No Man's Land of Gotham City on a mission of mercy, freeing a young girl from the clutches of the cannibalistic Calabax and returning her to her panic-stricken and slightly insane mother.
Yep.
But is the girl actually saved? Maury Povich says the results is you are not the father.
Oh.
No, that has nothing to do with it. Azrael 53, the Angel of Justice faces the Joker in a No Man's Land tie-in that shouldn't have happened. When Batman charges Azrael in finding and taking down Gotham's most insane threat, the clown Prince of Crime takes it as a grave insult. In number 54, the new serial killer named the Death Dancer, dancing for money, on the loose in Gotham City, striving to relieve the suffering of those poor, unfortunate souls.
Yes.
So sad, so true. This one wants to be thinner, that one wants to get the girl. And does he help them? Well, no, he slits their throats.
That's true. Well, in a way, he's helping them.
But this leads on basically the part one of a two-part because he thinks that Barbara Gordon needs his help.
Mm-hmm.
So number 55, the serial killer threatens Batman's plans to save No Man's Land. Oracle faces a grisly death until her guardian angel, Azrael, steps in to stop the serial killing Samaritan who threatens one of the key players in Gotham's plan to salvage Gotham.
Hello?
I'm glad I read these because on their own they were interesting.
Yep.
But again, if you don't read these, you don't miss anything.
No, which I didn't when I read them initially with the little thin trades.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Any big moments that you would say people need to know about?
I enjoy Denny O'Neil continuing trying to figure out who Azrael is. When he was created to be the replacement for Batman.
Sure.
And then they said, hey, maybe Denny O'Neil can write an ongoing series. And I am of the opinion that the first 25 issues of that series are great. They're just fantastic. But after that, he really lost his way. And I think this was an attempt to bring him back. These are basically little human dramas in the No Man's Land. The first one is basically, how Jean-Paul got his groove back, essentially, number 51. In number 52, the most significant part of this is the fact that the mother that Azrael brings into the No Man's Land to save her daughter tries to kill her daughter at one point, and then they're hugging. Because families are complicated.
Yep.
The Joker story just shouldn't have happened. I'm sorry, we shouldn't have even seen the Joker at this point. And maybe that's the novel version so stuck in my head of how that whole played out in the novel as opposed to the comics. But sending Jean-Paul to take on the Joker, what is Batman high?
Yeah.
It was an interesting issue, but to me, I think the two best are 54 and 55.
Yep.
I liked this Death Dancer. I liked his background, and I loved Azrael and Barbara kind of forming this brother-sister relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really sweet. Like, she was flirting with him. He didn't get it. But he's just like, I just kind of look at you as a sister. And she's cool with that.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I love that kind of stuff.
Yep. And there had been little flirtations throughout his series. Whenever she would pop up, there were, she would call him handsome or whatever. And would consistently ask if there was anyone in his life. And I like how she tries to clarify what that means. And I think the reason why she's doing it is because she lets on that there's someone in her life now. And so I think she wants to take a step back and be sure that, she didn't lead him on, which kind of she did, even though he didn't understand it as much. But I do like the fact that she's very adult about it and sort of wants to cover her bases. But she even, what is more intimate potentially than allowing him to push her wheelchair, which has no handles, as well as, I guess, carry her down several floors to the ground floor?
Yeah, Barbara's all about her independence.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think of her as being submissive or anything, but it's just a trust. Like, I like you, and I trust you enough to let you do this.
Yeah.
And just, I also get the feeling that Barbara is trying to bring him out of his shell a little bit. Because, Jean-Paul's a messed up kid. I mean, you look at that history, and it's just like basically he was like Jason Bourne, but with a weird religious order.
Sure.
He's just trying to live his life, and I think that's one of the things that gets me through these issues is that Jean-Paul is just trying to figure out who he is as a person. And what his role is, and he has all these things in his head. I find him to be a very sympathetic character. So when Barbara was nice to him, it made me like Barbara more. And even this Samaritan, the Death Dancer, one, great visual, fantastic visual. That one cover of him doing the kick and Azrael blocking is great. And on a side note, I really like the costume Azrael has in this. I think it's an interesting update to what he had before. But the fact that, this guy, it's like almost an episode of Criminal Minds where they're like, well, obviously he had something in his background that makes him want to do this. And the fact that there was a moment at the end of issue 54 when he goes, she seems sad. I need to make her happy. I'm just like, oh, God, he's going after Barbara.
Yeah, I was also nervous about that.
I was like, okay, Denny. You got me. I should have seen through that, but I got emotionally involved.
It was scary. I mean, there she is,
So, but I just love... Sorry, I hate to interrupt you. I just love that when he attacked her, though, she wasn't having any of it.
Oh, of course not. Yeah. She's been training with her Eskrima sticks and everything.
Richard Dragon.
Yep.
I read that Chronicles issue.
Oh, yes. So good. Yeah, with the, do you remember, been Road to No Man's Land. When was the last time you have read the lead up to this story?
Ooh, like 15 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, so just as a refresher, Batman sent Azrael off to protect this politician. The politician ended up getting killed by Nick Scratch, and Batman totally destroyed Azrael and said, you are off the team. And so the suggestion of the new costume, I think, if I remember correctly, comes from Barbara, but it's basically to disavow this old Azrael and take on this new getup. But this Nick Scratch is very much connected with Azrael's history, so I'm glad that he keeps popping up. And a big thing to know is that Nick Scratch is now back in No Man's Land. I don't remember if anything big happens with him, but I'll be looking forward to that. But so going back to the fact that Batman he doesn't trust him leading up to this story, now that you have been told this again, so to remind you, do you think, I don't know, is this weird that Batman is trusting him again, even though he took him off the team before?
No, I think Batman's using anybody he can at this point.
So it's all able bodies.
Yeah, it's just, it's funny. You told me all of that.
Yeah.
And I still don't remember a single thing about Road to No Man's Land.
That's okay. I recently read it, so that's why it's fresher in my mind.
I read the whole thing. I remember that cover of Mr. Wayne Goes to Washington of him before the Senate.
Yeah.
But if you ask me, if you put a gun to my head right now and say, what happened in that story? I'd be like, they failed.
Yeah, it's true. Well, that would be a good answer. I think you'd live.
Well, I appreciate that, because I don't want to...
Yeah, Nick Scratch, I had no idea when I was reading Road to No Man's Land that he played such a big part, that he's basically the reason why they blew up the bridges, because he was saying that it's a lost cause, you shouldn't divert any of the FEMA funds, even though it's not FEMA, to Gotham City, it's just destroyed. And so he's one of those big people, so I'm glad to see him back. I can't remember what sort of role he plays, but that's good. It's like I'm reading this for the first time.
Though I will say this, as I was reading the first issue, the first two issues of this, and watching them get into Gotham, I'm like, that seems a lot easier than they were making it out to be.
I agree.
Because basically, they just rode a car onto a ship, and the ship was just able to go across the harbor, no problem, no National Guard. So
yeah.
I liked the art in this too. I think Derek Robinson, I forget which one it is. I think he's got a good, clean style, and Denny O'Neil really doesn't miss a beat writing wise. I mean, his Joker issue, as much as I'm like, this shouldn't be here, I don't think this should be here. I think the Joker would not be doing this now. On the other hand, it's a really good Joker issue. I love his characterization of the Joker. And that trap that he puts that kid in. And that's actually a good Batman Azrael moment, because Azrael takes way too long figuring it out, and the Joker gets away, and Batman's like, you saved the kid. That was the important thing. I'm like, God, good on you, Batman.
Yeah.
Jerk.
Yeah, but I agree with you, what you said about the Joker, that he's just so big a bad that it seems strange to send a second stringer to go and get him, even though I do like Azrael. But what we both agree on absolutely also is the Good Samaritan here, the what else is it? The Death Dancer. Yeah, well, I've said something controversial when you were reading your thing, but do you think he is actually helping people? Could you potentially be on his side, or do you think he's just evil through and through?
I think the danger of him is that he is deciding when people need his help. People are not asking for his help.
That is true.
If we want to get into a discussion on euthanasia,
Dr. Kevorkian?
Well, and just the right to die, and because here's the thing, Dr. Kevorkian never technically killed anybody. He facilitated people to commit suicide. And the reason that is that so let's get really dark for a second.
Okay.
I've got a disease that is going to do something to me. It's either going to kill me or it's going to incapacitate me.
These are hypothetical things, right?
These are very hypothetical things. And I ask you to help me die. If you help me do it myself, I have made that decision, right? If you do it, then you have taken that decision out of my hands. Because what if at the last moment I change my mind, but you've already done it and I'm dead? So that's the sticky part of the right to die and euthanasia and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that he is making the decision. It's he sees people, like he sees Barbara.
Yep.
And she's sad. Oh, look at her. She's in a wheelchair. She's in the no man's land. She's never going to make it. I'm going to help her. But she doesn't need help. So I don't think he's helping people at all. I think he's a killer.
Okay. Yeah, and even that little kid, right, didn't want that to happen. I don't know, but there was someone else that was actually thankful, weren't they? Or am I wrong?
I think some people were probably thankful. If I remember correctly, there was one person. But at the end of the day, I think if you become that type of person, the chances of you losing perspective get greater with every person you help die.
Yeah.
I got really deep there. I'm sorry.
No, well, don't apologize for being deep. That was good to give us a different perspective on things. And that's why I asked the question, absolutely. Because I was just thinking about him. I mean, that they call him in the synopsis a Samaritan, right? And the biblical implications of that. So, yeah. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Well, any other thoughts on this final batch of comics?
I think it was a very strong beginning to the No Man's Land as a story. Even though I am not going to be on the next 4 parts, I'm like, maybe I'll, dig out the, get the, excuse me, the trade paperbacks off the shelf and go through everything with you, just to see. Because I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, I kind of binge listened to the graphic audio version of Greg Rucka's novel. And now it's just like, well, let me read the comics again so I can do the compare and contrast thing. Because there are things he completely leaves out, and there are things he glosses over, just in terms to keep the narrative, because it is a novel and not like a series of novels.
Sure.
So,
yep. Well, your BFF will be on next, so.
Aw.
Yeah.
Tom?
You're trying to make it up to him since you insulted his profession.
Yes. Well, your profession too. So. And the profession of like so many other podcasters I know.
Which is interesting. I guess, why is that? We need an outlet? We need to talk to people?
I think when you think of what podcasting is, it's communicating with people. It's teaching in a way.
Yeah.
Because you're giving an opinion, and so not everybody knows as much as you do. And I think you're all closet radio show host wannabes.
Oh, that is great.
That was a joke. That was a serious joke. I love you.
Yeah, as a
don't be mad.
Yeah. Last time you were on the show, peel back the curtain. Tonight was my back to school night, so I had a long day, giving presentations and things to parents and trying to sell Latin. So.
And tonight and today at work, I returned a bunch of school supplies people didn't need.
Oh man. Well, what would you give this Azrael group of comics?
I'm going to give it an 8. Taking down 1 for the Joker story and 1 because it's not a necessary part of the overall story, but it's a good read nonetheless.
Yeah, I would agree. I was still engaged. It was still very interesting. I think an 8 seems fair. I especially like Nick Scratch still playing a part, and of course the Barbara Gordon, them finally meeting instead of having this phone relationship was also great. Well, 2 final questions for you before you depart. Number 1, how does No Man's Land as a whole rank for you in terms of a Batman story? And if you want to, you can always compare it to other ones, like, I like Contagion more, or things like that. If you think of it in terms of events, how does it rank for you?
I think it ranks right behind Nightfall.
Okay.
I would put it at number 2, with Nightfall being number 1. And I really consider them kind of the alpha and omega of Batman events. For the 90s especially. I think, Contagion was fun because it was kind of like a horror movie.
Yeah.
Legacy was, just an excuse to have the rematch between Bane and Batman that people have been expecting. Cataclysm was a disaster film and interesting in its own way. And the stuff that came later, I mean, I'm a fan of Batman Murderer or Bruce Wayne Murderer, Bruce Wayne Fugitive.
Yeah.
I have absolutely zero time for War Games. And Officer Down was like the first crossover after this, and that was just basically getting Jim Gordon off the table. But I think in terms of No Man's Land had a point, it had a purpose, and it put Batman, it advanced Batman as a character. Now, they, within 5 years, completely regressed that character and put him back to where he was before No Man's Land. But at the same time, I think they really did a good job of creating an event that made you want to pay attention. So I would definitely rank it as number 2 after Nightfall.
I think that Shag told me you really like Joker's Last Laugh. Is that a lie?
Joker's Last Laugh. That was 2001.
Because it's coming from him and he tricked me before, I assumed it was a lie. But then he also told me that Amazon's Attack or something. You also like that? Why do you keep sighing?
Because he's lying. Okay. Amazon's Attack is terrible on just about every level.
Okay. So he was trying to trick me.
Yeah, he's trying to trick you.
Okay. It only happens once.
Basically, this is what you need to do.
Sure.
If the moment Shag says, Mike likes that, immediately message me on your phone. Don't tell him you're doing it, okay? Just immediately message me on my phone. Joker's Last Laugh was a noble failure.
Okay.
I will, and Joker's Last Laugh isn't a Batman crossover. That's a DC Universe crossover. So it's kind of different. Joker's Last Laugh also suffered because it came like literally a month after Our Worlds at War ended. So you go from one crossover right into another one. Now that one all took place in 1 month because it was a weekly miniseries. And it was supposed to do something that at the end they said, we're not going to do that anymore. Because the Joker, if I remember correctly, the Joker actually was, the Joker was supposed to die at the end of it. And Nightwing was supposed to kill him.
That would have been amazing.
But they were like, no. But that also introduced the Supermax idea, where there's like this prison where all of the really bad ones are held. So am I saying that I would come on and discuss Joker's Last Laugh with you? Absolutely. But remember,
yes,
Shag says Mike likes this, and you get your spider sense tingles.
Yep.
Immediately message me.
Okay.
And then you can say live on air, Mike just called you a liar.
Oh boy. Okay. Sounds good. Man.
So, there you go.
Yeah, he tricked me with Millennium, wasn't it?
I think it was Genesis.
Oh, that's right. It was Genesis, yeah. Oh, yes, I haven't read Millennium. I just know about it. Oh, boy. Okay. Well, let's not dwell on sad and painful things. The final question is, of course, where people can find you to support you and listen to your wonderful shows. FortressofBailey2.com. It's the one-stop shop for all things Michael Bailey podcasting, except for guest appearances and such. You can find From Crisis to Crisis, a Superman podcast, The Overlooked Dark Knight, back episodes of all my other shows. It's all pretty much there, available at FortressofBailey2.com. And if I planned everything right, I will, as soon as we're done recording, I will send you the trailer that I did with Shag, oddly enough. Woo!
So, for the Fortress Network in general. So.
Okay. Well, as always, it is an extreme pleasure to talk to you, and it's fun to get your perspective on things, especially since you were reading comics at the time and I was a slow starter. So that's always great, and of course, I am so indebted to you because you're one of the reasons why I started Batgirl to Oracle in general, and you're one of the reasons why, you are the reason why I read No Man's Land, so I owe a great deal to you.
I appreciate that. I think you were also 13 when this came out, so...
Yeah, I was more into going to the back issue bins and picking out covers of Spider-Man that I thought were interesting and reading stories based on that.
Yeah, this No Man's Land I really would love to talk to the person that started reading Batman with No Man's Land, because that must have been like, wow, you love jumping into the deep end, don't you?
Well, that happened to me though with diving into Infinite Crisis and Civil War, and that was like my gateway back into it. So I wonder I think Infinite Crisis might be worse. But yeah, with No Man's Land, yeah, you're missing the whole backstory to why it's even like that. So, oh man. Okay.
But thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it. Yeah. Anytime you ask, anytime really, truly, if anybody's like, hey, you want to be on the show, I'm touched, because it's just like, wow, someone wants to hear my opinion on something. And I'm the youngest. So, historically, that's not really the case. But also because it's you.
Oh.
I've got all the time in the world for you,
Oh,
Stella.
thank you. You're a kind man.
And anybody's got a problem with you, they got a problem with me.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'll send all those parents your way. I will say that we made podcasting history because no dog interrupted us.
Yes. Things have changed at the Fortress a little bit. The dogs are not quite in the room anymore.
Yeah.
They are probably very angrily napping in the other room right now because they hate that they can't sit with me anymore. But my God, just having 20 pounds of dog in my lap while I'm recording, I mean, now I can actually sit closer to the microphone.
Yep. Now you know what Santa feels like.
Santa has 20-pound dog sitting in his lap. Maybe that's Santa's training. Maybe that's Santa's training during the year, though. Like he's listening to Eye of the Tiger
to beef it up. Yeah. So. I just thought of your wife. Didn't she, as a connection to Death of Superman, didn't she always wonder about that girlfriend, the mermaid? And then remember, wasn't she mentioned Lori? Wasn't she mentioned at that dinner? I thought I laughed when that was mentioned in that film.
Yeah, and Pa Kent was less than modern in his "I've always wondered about Pete Ross" comments. But for those that don't know what Stella's talking about, if you go to a 2013 episode of Views from the Long Box. It was the moment that I realized that things that are perfectly natural to me are insane to regular people. Yeah. So when I mentioned, we were talking about the love of Superman's life, and I was like, well, there was Lori Lamaris, the mermaid. And she was like, wait, what? Are you punking me? Seriously? And that was the moment that I realized that a mermaid girlfriend sounded perfectly normal to me. Sure. And to her was just like, what are you talking about?
I think that moment... still for you, but involving me would have been the super ventriloquism that I learned about that other time that you were on. I just thought, what sort of sick idea is this? How does it even make sense? Oh, man.
You are not the only one that I have mentioned super ventriloquism to.
Goodness.
Rebecca Johnson also had a very similar reaction to, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So...
okay, well, thanks again, and until next time, it'll be, I don't know what it'll be. I'll have to force you on for War Games or something. But yeah, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Stella.
Now it's time for some listener email.
Mail time. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time. Mail's here. Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
I have a couple comments on past episodes, like way in the past, and an email. The first comment is from episode 153, which was the 7th Shipper special, and this is from Fat Albus, which is great. Just came across this. I must say it was simply lovely hearing you both talk Spider-Man again. I didn't expect to be name-dropped, though. For the record, I have never ever claimed Peter and MJ ever did anything intimate in ASM number 122. In fact, with the kindest of respect to Stella, I think she might have misremembered that conversation of crawlspace, because if I recall correctly, it actually was discussing if Peter and Mary Jane slept together in ASM 149, not 122. In fairness, both scenes are from Jerry Conway issues in which we get epilogue pages with just the two characters in an apartment, so this might be the cause for the mix-up. I like both of your choices a lot, by the way. I would have added in the scene of Spidey and Black Cat's first kiss from Spec Spidey episode 10, as well as the scene of Peter crawling out of the grave in Kraven's Last Hunt. Though MJ isn't in that scene herself, he is thinking about her. To be honest, there are just too many to choose from, even if you just keep to 616 comics. In regards to how big of a deal people should put stock by the Spider marriage, I agree that the worth of the series and most stories doesn't begin and end with how much it does or doesn't ship Peter and Mary Jane. I think most Spider-Man fans love the character and series for bigger reasons than that, but a lot of them, myself included, see that relationship as an important part of the mythology, just as Norman Osborn being the big bad or Aunt May is. I certainly don't need to see the character in every story to regard it as good, but because the character, along with all the Marvel Pantheon basically, is supposed to develop or at least be the sum of his experiences, it is a case of at this point Spider-Man should be married to MJ as part of the inherent status quo of the book in much the same way Norman Osborn and Aunt May should know he is Spider-Man at this point, and the omissions of those elements are reductive to the series in major ways. They aren't the be-all and end-all, but they are big aspects of it, sort of like if you did Superman without Lois Lane, or the X-Men without some kind of version of Wolverine. Or if you switch it to anime, doing modern Dragon Ball without Vegeta. Isn't that his name? Vegeta? I can't remember that old guy. It's just how the series has evolved. They don't need to be in everything, but they need to be part of the status quo all the same, if you get me. Well, thanks, Fat Albus. I admit I'm actually not sure who you are. I can't remember who we name dropped. I mean, besides Brad Douglas, I don't know if you're Brad Douglas, though. So it's I don't know. I just don't. This is one of my issues, is that once I record, I don't remember a lot of what I sort of spilled out. It's just everything comes out and it's there. It's left my brain at that point. But no, in any case, Fat Albus, thank you so much for writing in and all your comments about Spider-Man. The email I got was from Michael Ridge. He says, Salve, Stella. Ole is pronounced to rhyme with holy. Oh, Ole. Okay. Ole is pronounced to rhyme with holy and is considered a common Scandinavian nickname for Olaf, as well as a name on its own. Minnesota's most famous real Ole is probably Ole Rolvag. Ole Rolvag. He gives me some phonetic pronunciations here. Who wrote fictional accounts of Norwegian immigrants to the northern Great Plains. The most famous Ole is the one who appears in both Ole and Sven and Ole and Lena jokes. Pretty much any kind of joke about a naive country pair works. The doctor tells Ole, your heart is worn out. I don't think you'll last more than a day or two. Ole says, oh, doctor, I don't know how to tell Lena. Can you talk to her so that she can be prepared? Sure, Ole. I'll talk to her on my way out. You rest a little, and I'll tell Lena to let you sleep for an hour. When he wakes up, Ole smells brownies baking and thinks, oh, that Lena. She knows just what I like. Lena comes in a minute later, bringing him a cup of coffee. Why didn't you bring me a brownie with this coffee? Don't be silly, Ole. The brownies are for the wake. I'm glad you're back. Wow, what a terrible joke there. I'm glad you're back from Kenya unbitten, Michael Ridge. Thanks, Michael, for number 1, that joke, number 2, the pronunciation, and number 3, of course, your well wishes that I made it back from Kenya. Yes, unbitten. Besides, I think I was bitten once or twice by some sort of flying species, but because we were in higher elevation, I don't think it was a mosquito. We actually didn't sleep with mosquito nets in Nyeri, but we did in Nairobi, which was interesting. But luckily I was taking my Malarone or whatever to prevent any possibility of malaria. But in any case, yes, I am in fact back. Thank you so much for the comments. Remember, you can always leave them on the website. They pop up. Either I'll get a little notification that I got it, or Dustin's been really nice and sending them to me as well. Or you can email me, batgirltheoracle@gmail.com. Okay. Well, when I come back, Michael's gone. He's out of the picture. I'm going to discuss Batman's wedding, because I'm a shipper, of course, and oddly, Nightwing issues number, that's interesting, issue numbers, okay, I'm going to discuss Nightwing, issues number 44 through 46, but first, Zaius' Radio Hour, featuring Dead Mouse, Ghosts and Stuff, featuring Rob Swire.
like nothing is true. She took me to a place where my senses gave way. Shutting down what the people say. Climbing up, killing time, let them give you some. Take my hand and let it come, let it come, let it take it back when she knows that you're doing it right. 'Cause everybody else knows what they're taking tonight. But I just wanna play it right. You're gonna get that tonight. So far I've been walking the line of my own. Lift me up to the stars, we are coming home. I only got a taste, but we're out of time. We're sold in the cold, physical design. Set me free, send me out on the run. Lift me up to the sun, to the sun, to the... We are burning down, we are burning down. It's the way that you fake it, I know it's too late. But I just wanna play it right. We're gonna get that tonight. I just wanna take you down. We're gonna bring you
Welcome back. Sorry about that weird confusion about the Nightwing, how to grammatically do that. It's funny because I love to correct people when they say cul-de-sacs, because it's actually cul-de-sac. And then there's also, I think there's just some stuff you have to think about, because it's not sister-in-laws, but sisters-in-law. So I was thinking about the issue and whatever. But I do want to talk a little bit about the Batman wedding, which occurred in issue number 50. Because I've, been on sabbatical from the Batman universe when it came out, and I've not really discussed it, I think, with anyone. I was spoiled as to what happened by, let me think of who did that. I think maybe it was Josh Bertoni, but I wasn't upset with it because it had been, it was like San Diego Comic-Con. I think he must have asked, did you read it? And I said no, and he said, well, they didn't get married. So I at least emotionally was prepared for what didn't happen. I feel like a lot of it came down to the fact that Catwoman feels like she needs to make some sort of heroic sacrifice to keep in line with Batman and almost to, I don't know if prove her worth to him, but I think she has been so influenced by him that might be in the back of her mind. But it's also one that she knows she needs to make in order to keep Batman on the street, because I think she realizes how important he is. And this, unfortunately, I feel like comes from her interactions a little bit with Holly. I think with, who else was she interacting with? Was it Riddler? I know definitely, the Joker in that weird little church scene, which felt like I missed an issue because it looked like she was bleeding out and about to die, and who knows where the Joker was at the end of that. I think that was 49. But anyways, I feel like it didn't come of her own volition necessarily. I think a lot of it is when you're influenced by people around you, and even if they make some sort of slight comment, it's in the back of your mind, and you're stewing a little bit on this, which I feel like I may have accidentally done to someone recently, actually, and I was doing it out of care and concern, but I had to double back and try to almost get that thought out by like transitioning and being like, oh, but you know, that person's crazy. Don't worry about it. I think it's, yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I had to do that sort of thing and then move on to more pleasant things. But I think she was almost wrongfully influenced, and I wonder if she had not had those interactions with Joker, with Holly, would she have come to that decision on her own? But back to the sacrifice, I think, you know, the only sacrifice she feels is worthy is her love and her heart, and so she gives up the marriage. Whether the whole idea or just the action at the time, I can't say, but very unfortunate and disappointing. Because, you know, of all the things you have to sacrifice your love. And I can see some situations in real life that this would happen and you would laud that person. But it's just sad here, quite honestly. You know, especially with the build-up, I had such hopes that it would happen, and I think it could absolutely work, as we've seen issues leading up to this where they've gone on missions together, or issues where he leaves her sleeping in bed and he goes on his own missions. And so it very much seemed like a tenable relationship, and it could happen. You know, she's also a capable woman. She can take care of herself, so the danger factor is lower and the longevity factor is higher. And I just felt like there were a couple years worth of stories here that I think have been killed potentially before their time. You know, Catwoman has her own book now, so I hope the story isn't over and this isn't ignored. And they're still my favorite Batman couple in a sense of whom I believe Batman should be with. But just sad that this didn't happen. And it's interesting, the last pages, you know, just of her leaping off, and he realizes very quickly when she's not coming. Or I guess maybe, I can't remember how long he waits, and he just goes, you know, there's not even a thought. And I wonder what goes through his brain as Bruce Wayne as Batman, of why isn't she there, and things like that. So I'm disappointed, yes. Do I think Tom King deserved death threats, and which then led to the unfortunate need for him to have bodyguards at San Diego Comic-Con? Absolutely not. You know, when you get down to this fictional storytelling, I've been upset by fictional storytelling also. Something most recent, you know, coming to mind is on Pretty Little Liars. I've talked about this before, but my OTP for Emily was Paige, and it always seemed to go back to that, and even in the final season there was that they were there together, but people were making a big deal of her and Allison, and that's how it ended up. And so that actually made me really upset, and if I ever see it in a shipper video, I get really disgusted and turn the shipper video off. So, you know, just to say that I get upset too, but I'm not going to go out and threaten someone because of the storytelling. You know, he has the complete control over what direction he feels like it should go. And I think that as human beings and as people that are made in the image of God, we should probably I shouldn't even say probably, we should not be threatening other people just because of a fictional storytelling. So there's Batman Wedding. I will say that it was put together really well with lots of full page, not really splashes, but almost covers that were created by past, present, potentially future artists and creators. And so those were pretty cool. But it's also interesting because they wrote letters together, and that was the narration. And I'm glad that they reflected back to, because I can't remember who said it before. It might have been Batman. It might have been, I don't know. But that person said, you know, it's been a while since I've written him or her a letter, and even reflects back, you know, the last time I did this was when whatever she was on trial or that stuff was happening, and Bane and all that. So it's good that they remembered the continuity. And yeah, the letters are always interesting in how they overlap and how there are stark differences between them. So I suggest reading it. Sorry if I spoiled it, but, you know, certainly come up with thoughts and send them my way. Just, were you disappointed? I guess this will be the question for the episode. Were you disappointed that they did not get married? What are your thoughts on it? Did you enjoy the issue? But what I want to spend, I guess, more of my time, I guess it'll actually be a little weird switcheroo, right? Because in the vintage stuff, I usually do summaries and then just briefly talk how is Babs coming into play. But I do want to talk about the recent Nightwing arc that came out, which goes from 44 to 46. Actually, that's incorrect. It goes from 44 to 47. I was thinking it was a 4-page, so I lied to you in that little intro there. But I just, instead of summarizing or, giving plot details, I'm just going to give you what DC said in its solicitations. So the writer for the whole thing is Benjamin Percy, and the artist for the most part is Christopher Mooneyham. In Nightwing 44, it's the Bleeding Edge Part 1. Changes on the horizon when a new technologist sets his sights on Bloodhaven, creating a holographic, interconnected city where everyone is an individual and also part of a larger network. It's the internet made physical. Gentrification on a gigabyte-laced steroids. But when this new utopia encroaches on his turf, Nightwing starts to uncover a sinister plot based not on revenge, but on a reckoning. The Bleeding Edge begins here, setting Dick Grayson on a path to clarify the ideals at his very core, his sense of home and identity. Then in 45, Nightwing investigates a string of murders that at first seemed disconnected. But when signs start to point to the digital underworld, the mean streets of Bloodhaven begin to transform. So how does the hero like Dick Grayson, used to using his fists to solve problems, stop a villain he can't get his hands on, especially when Bloodhaven isn't the only thing compromised by a tech implant in this new smart city initiative? So is Nightwing's mind. Nightwing 46, a new high-tech corporation setting up shop in Bloodhaven, claims to be the cure for what ails a crumbling city. But Nightwing learns it's a very hostile takeover when he runs afoul of their metahuman operative, a digital phantom impervious to physical attack. Luckily, Nightwing has his very own IT backup, Batgirl. But can the two work together after their meeting in Batgirl number 25, also in stores this month? Just to note, so that was the July issue, Nightwing 46. Batgirl 25 was delayed to August, so I don't know how it will or has impacted Nightwing. And then finally, Nightwing 47, Dick Grayson may want to consider a new career in cybersecurity because of major tech upgrades coming to Bloodhaven mean deadly danger for everyone in the city. Nightwing battles the mysterious tech mogul Willem Cloak, who it turns out is just a front man for the real threat, the organization known only as the Dark Web. Time to change those passwords, Bloodhaven. Okay, so there's the publisher summary for all of those, and I did want to at least note that in 45, Nightwing 45, if you pay attention to the cover, you will notice that the logo colors change to reflect Batgirl's appearance, and that's mainly why I'm talking about these issues today, is because Barbara Gordon, Batgirl / Oracle, does in fact make appearances throughout this little arc. Overall, I really liked the art and the story of this arc. It just really reminded me of classic 90s Nightwing. I don't know, just the whole feel of it, the look of it, the story itself, and just how it was plotted. Just classic Chuck Dixon stuff. I think it also represents a greater theme of technology, the good and bad uses of it, and, of course, human interaction. We get to see both sides of the argument in almost Dick versus Babs, right? One who likes being connected to the world, personally, which is Dick, and one who doesn't necessarily eschew human interaction, but certainly has a gift with technology and loves it. We also see major shipping with Dick and Babs here. Some of it is classic, with Dick asking tech advice from Babs at the very beginning. Some of it is a little weird, and this is something that Chris mentioned in his previous Batman Adventures, his segment within a segment with the Nightwing there, and I was listening to it and I thought, what is he talking about? And so, of course, I've read it now, but we've got Dick waking up to what turns out to be a digital hallucination of Babs, and it makes it seem like there's been a drunken night with sex implied. Dick is late meeting a client, but he walks out of this situation with Babs instead of talking with her, which is a little bit familiar if you think about, Nightwing Annual number 2. But it's also the question of what these two mean to each other that's flowing throughout these 4 issues. Now, Don recently asked me if I thought DC was trying to get these two together again, and I said I had no idea, because it seems like it's constantly a will they, won't they situation. Here we see that at least Percy, and the editor, if it was allowed of course, believes that there is something special between the two, especially since Dick, number one, is having the hallucination in the first place with her in it, since the tech was hooked to his brain, so subconsciously there's something there. That means something. And number two, the fact that he admits that she comes pretty close to what some people would consider a soulmate, whether or not he believes in such a thing. There's obviously a deep connection between the two of them. You know, even if you're a Dick and Corey fan, I think you cannot ignore that. Just like, even though I'm a Dick and Babs fan, I do recognize that there is history and there's something special between Dick and Corey. I feel like they have worked better in this arc than they have for a couple of years. And whether that turns into something serious or it's just teasing the readership is just beyond me. Because, you know, it's something like the Batman Catwoman situation that I don't need it to be for a couple arcs or big tease and then it falls apart. I would like it to be consistent and have some legs with it, have some longevity, and see where we go from there. I should also mention that there are some small interactions between the two in the prologue to the wedding issues, where at the end of Babs's, which I think was Batgirl versus Riddler, it ends with her asking Dick to have coffee. Overall, I really recommend this arc. I thought it was really well done. It has similarities to some of the mental and tech issues that Batgirl has run up against lately, which if this were to happen in her book, I would say, oh my gosh, not again, but at least it's a different one and it brings her in there, so there's some sharing there. And of course the shipping, and it just begs, I think, a deeper question of where do these two characters go from here. But there you go, what's going on in Nightwing. Now over to Chris for his Batman Adventures review.
That's like finding the variant cover you wanted still on the shelf at your local comic shop, and one last fun comic-related hurrah before the school year starts. Am I right, Stella? Thank you very much, Stella. Hello, Bat fans. Welcome to the Batman 66 Batman Adventures review segment. Thank you for downloading, and as always, thank you for not fast-forwarding. My name is Chris, and I am very glad to be with you. So I asked for votes on what to cover with the return of a Batman 66 miniseries while covering the Batman Adventures title. And while I didn't get a lot of votes, at the time of this recording the votes were dead even and right down the middle evenly split. Deadlocked at a tie. So let's get to it and take a quick look at both. First up, Archie meets Batman 66 number 1. Story by Jeff Parker and Michael Morrissey, pencils by Dan Parent, inks by Jay Bone, cover by Michael and Laura Allred, with variant covers by Derek Charm, Francesco Francavilla, Sandy Jarrell with Kelly Fitzpatrick, Dan Parent with Jay Bone, and Rosario Tito Pena and Ty Templeton. Our story is entitled The Batman of Riverdale. At the 1966 World Science Fair in Gotham City, Poison Ivy and the Bookworm strike. With Bookworm after an electronic book, the terrific trio of Batman, Robin, and Batgirl show up and manage to capture Poison Ivy, but the Bookworm gets away. At the United Underworld headquarters, Catwoman, Joker, Riddler, and the Penguin plot to strike at Riverdale and target their richer citizens. The Penguin has recruited the Siren, and we smash cut to Riverdale and Hiram Lodge, Veronica's father, already under her spell. Veronica notices something off with her father and tells Archie and the gang about her concern, but they dismiss her. Veronica goes to the local police, but the desk officer appears to already be under the Siren's spell. Veronica then goes to science-smart Dilton Doily, and by radio he manages to reach the Batcave, and Veronica implores to the heroes for their help. To be continued. Wow, I've missed this incarnation of Batman, and I am so glad we got some new Batman 66 stories. This series should not be confused with, nor is connected to, the recent Harley and Ivy meet Betty and Veronica miniseries. I thought the artwork was great, with fine depictions of all the respective characters and Archie and the gang, especially Veronica, wearing outfits and dresses reflective of the time. When there have been Batman 66 6-issue limited series in the past, I sometimes gripe that some of those stories dragged on a bit and could have possibly been told in 4 issues. Here I think we're off to a great start. Good, fast-paced storytelling with a lot more character appearances and pleasant surprises. I'm going to give Archie meets Batman 66 number 1 a healthy 8.5 bats out of 10. Over on the TBU website, Dan Trzynski gave this 4 out of 5 bats. Next up, Batman Adventures number 8. Our story is entitled Larceny, My Sweet. Written by Kelly Puckett, pencils by Mike Parabek, inks by Rich Burchett, and colors by Rick Taylor. Act 1. Break the Bank. Gotham City has been plagued by robberies that the media have dubbed the work from the Invisible Man. A hulking man breaks into a bank and begins to loot it. An alarm goes off, and Batman and Summer Gleason in a news truck with her cameraman both head to the site. Batman breaks into the bank through a window, but the figure punches Batman so hard he sends him flying into filing cabinets, knocking the Cape Crusader unconscious. Summer and her cameraman arrive, and Summer stakes out the alley in the rear. She's chased by thugs and bumps into a blonde-haired suited man and pleads for his help. The man obliges and pummels her would-be attackers. The man and Summer look in each other's eyes amid Valentine-drawn effects. The man retreats, and a rose boutonniere drops from his suit, which Summer retrieves. Act 2, Love's Lost Labor. While Batman unsuccessfully tries to identify the Invisible Man suspect, Summer pines for her new love at her desk. The hulking figure strikes at another bank, and while Batman confronts him again, the massive man gets away. But Batman manages to put a tracker on him. Later, Summer gets a call from her new love, asking her to dinner. Act 3, Beauty and the Beast. Summer's new beau waits at a restaurant, and he is suddenly lassoed by Batman and pulled outside. Batman reveals he has deduced the man is Clayface, and the villain reveals his gloppy form, and the two fight. Summer passes by and shrieks upon seeing Clayface. Batman uses a sonar device to subdue the villain. Summer asks Batman if he's seen the handsome blonde man, but Batman says the man she described was never there. The end. I think this story did a better job than the previous issue of showing the softer side of a Batman villain. Summer Gleason's inclusion was a nice touch. I like the artwork, great fight scenes, and facial expressions, especially with Summer. Interesting side note, it's depicted that the station Summer works for is WGBS, who superfans know that was the TV station that Clark Kent was a TV reporter for back in the day. This was a good story, a solid story, and I'm giving this 8.5 out of 10 bats. Now for everyone's favorite segment within a segment, Night Watch, where I take a quick look at the happenings in the Nightwing title from a shipper perspective. At the time of this recording, Nightwing number 47 is the current issue. The title is The Bleeding Edge Finale. Writer Benjamin Percy, art by Chris Mooneyham. We have tech-created bad guys. We have Russian mob women. We have Batgirl and Nightwing working together. We don't have a scene as steamy as the last issue when Batgirl knocked Dick out and dressed him in his Nightwing costume, but we have great teamwork and chemistry with Batgirl and Nightwing, and how welcome and refreshing is that in and of itself. There are even a couple of scenes where Batgirl really saves Nightwing from some peril here as well. Oddly, this story bills itself as the, quote, finale, but it does end on something of a, quote, to be continued moment. So hopefully we haven't seen the last of Batgirl in this title. So, with this issue, I'm going to give a standard and mild shipper alert to repeat a standard to mild shipper alert. This concludes this segment of Night Watch. Listeners, please check out Stella on the Required Reading Podcast. Shout out to the Sutherlands. Check out Warlord Worlds, Tricker Talk, Xenozoic Xenophiles, Sensational Sleuths, Fantastic Fantasies, Convention Correspondence, and Super Secret Spies. Listeners, you can find and follow me on Twitter at BT1BatBooks. You can also find me on the Batbooks for Beginners podcast with Jerry Green, where we review trade paperbacks with Batman and related characters. Jerry and I also have a podcast called The Professor Frenzy Show, where we talk about independent comics every week. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and I hope you check it out and give it a try. Please leave any comments for the podcast or this segment on the Batman Universe website. Consider supporting the Batman Universe on Patreon by following a link on the homepage website. If you wish to contact me directly, my email address is bruce.wayne@gothamcity.us. Thank you very much for your support. Who will go undercover at Riverdale High, and will the villains succeed with their ravenous Riverdale riggers? What plans does Rupert Boss Thorne have for Batman and Gotham City? And what is the secret of the Little Red Book? Don't fail to listen to the next podcast where the answers to these wild, wall-to-wall, walloping, wambling, whirlwood whimsicals, whinnies, wares, and wonderstrucks will be found at the next whistle stop. Same Batstella feed, same Batstella site.
Thanks, Chris. Next up is my anime watch list. First up, a film. I went to see, it's my second, what are those called? Fathom events. I always have to go out. I have to go to Richmond in order to get it, which is shocking because I'm in a city that's pretty popular, and I think that, especially with the students and everything, because I'm in a university town, that they would go see some of these Fathom events here, especially the animes. But anyways, it's Fireworks. Should we see it from the side or the bottom? It's a 2017 film, about an hour and 30 minutes. It is both Japanese with English subtitles and an English dub. I ended up going to the English dub. So the summary is, it's summer, and Norimichi Shimada and his friends want to know if fireworks look round or flat from the side. They forge a plan to find the answer at Moshimo Festival's fireworks display. However, Norimichi finds himself conflicted when his classmate Nazuno Oikawa plans to run away from home and wants Norimichi to join her. When things go awry in their attempt to escape, a strange orb in Nazuna's possession gives them another chance at staying together. I would say that this is new anime viewer approved, but you really need to pay attention to, well, the whole thing, but to the beginning especially, because it sort of gives hints to things that are going on. There are many questions as to, I guess, a sense of reality. Is this happening or is this happening? As well as the ending, what truly has happened. It reminds me a little bit of Your Name, though I think I enjoyed, personally, Your Name a little bit better. And if I were to compare it, though, to a film that I think maybe more people have seen, I would say Butterfly Effect is almost similar, because there is a sense of going back in time and changing some things, and then how does it impact other events potentially. But yeah, I would just say I would see Your Name first, potentially, and then Fireworks. And then Fireworks, if I would say, maybe, give it the chance to watch it twice. I personally have only seen it once, but now having seen the whole thing, it would be interesting to potentially see it again. And then for my show, it's called After the Rain, and it's recent. I was shocked when I went on my anime list and I found it was 2018, because, I don't know, I just felt like I saw a shipper video, because sometimes that's how I find my anime, a shipper video longer before that, but I guess I don't know. But anyways, it's 2018, 12 episodes, Japanese with English subtitles. Right now, I saw it on Amazon Prime. I don't think it has an English dub. Summary is, Akira Tachibana, a reserved high school student and former track runner, has not been able to race the same as she used to since she experienced a severe foot injury, specifically the Achilles tendon. And although she is regarded as attractive by her classmates, she is not interested in the boys around school. While working part-time at the Garden Cafe, Akira begins to develop feelings for the manager, a 45-year-old man named Masami Kondo, despite the large age gap. Kondo shows genuine concern and kindness toward the customers of his restaurant, which, while viewed by others as soft or weak, draws Akira to him. Spending time together at the restaurant, they grow closer, which only strengthens her feelings. Weighed down by these uncertain emotions, Akira finally resolves to confess, but what will be the result? So, I would say it's new anime viewer approved, but you have to have an open mind, and I feel like Donovan, my dear friend, is probably already cringing because you've got a 17-year-old with a 45-year-old man. Let me say that while... Shoot, I just lost my train of thought because somebody texted me. Okay, I will say that while the attraction is mostly one-sided, and I think he might have moments of, seeing that potential, but he very much keeps her at arm's length, and he is very adamant about only being friends. But he's a kind character, and what I really like about this show, though, is not only that both of the characters are very likable, and, there's no vindictive characters in the show, because that seems to consistently happen. But I feel like it's just really deep, because I think, in my personal opinion, that both of the characters have sort of these holes that are empty because there is this true love that they have for something that they've given up. For Akira, it's the fact that she really loved running, right? Track and field. And then she had this injury, and then she didn't do rehab, and she hasn't run again. And for Masami, he loved writing, and unfortunately I think that ruined some of his relationships. He's divorced now, and he just hasn't done it since, and he's been this general manager, right, for the restaurant. And so you almost have these two characters come together, and in their friendship, in their relationship, they realize something is missing, and they both decide to go for their dreams at the end, and they both push each other for that. So towards the end, you start to see the general manager starting to write more, and then Akira starts to have interactions with her best friend that she's sort of not been interacting with, and they were really bonded over track and field, and her best friend's sad, and also feels like, surely we can be friends over more things than just track and field. But it takes Akira a little bit, because sometimes she's short with people. She's just very blunt, to realize that she wants to be back in that life of track and field and have her good friend as well. So I like that through this relationship, they realize what they truly want. So that's why I say, with an open mind. So hopefully Donovan will forgive me. Oh, man. So there you go. Those are my 2 anime that I think you should watch. And just FYI, Mary and the Witch's Flower is on Netflix now, which I think I recommended. Ooh, when did I go see that? It might have been January or something. So now it's easier to watch. I'm sure it's probably the English, because there are Jim Broadbent's in there and Kate Winslet, so I'm sure they probably did that. Next up, and finally, is my literature recommendation. Several books. Here we go. Achilles by Madeline Miller. I've got a library story after this. A thrilling, profoundly moving, and utterly unique retelling of the legend of Achilles and the Trojan War. A tale of gods, kings, immortal fame, and the human heart. This Song of Achilles is a dazzling literary feat that brilliantly reimagines Homer's enduring masterwork, the Iliad. An action-packed adventure, an epic love story, a marvelously conceived and executed page-turner. This was really great, and I'm a classicist, and I knew the story. I've read the Iliad, of course, partially in the Greek and mostly in the English, but I would recommend this, just getting a sense of who Achilles is. Madeline Miller is also a classicist, which is great. So if you're into that sort of thing, I think that you would enjoy this. So here's my library story. I got this from the library, and I read it, and when I got it from the library, I noticed maybe in the 200 page or area that sort of a crinkle that, if paper gets wet and it dries, I've got that crinkle. So a couple of those. So I turn it back in, and I get an email that I'm going to have to pay for a damaged book because of water damage. Now, part of it was, in fact, that crinkling. And then there's something at the beginning, the first couple pages, and I honestly can't tell you whether or not that was there. And because I didn't specifically remember, I thought, well, I might as well just pay for it in case I did something. Because it had been raining consistently, and who knows if rain got in the car when I was sitting in the seat, or I don't know, when I dropped it in the book thing. But in any case, I was talking to the person, and I thought, oh no, it's, I don't recall dropping off a damaged book. And I guess because it was newer, they more closely monitor it. So then, I go to the library to borrow books because I don't necessarily want to buy them, but now I own this book for $22, which is not what I would have paid. Let's just say that. And so, number one, I'm sad just because I take good care of things that aren't mine, things that are mine, and something got ruined. The other thing is, I'm worried. Is there going to be like a mark on my library account that they know that I damaged a book? Because that would be really disappointing. The reason why I think this is just because it's been taking a while to get some holds in that I've been putting on, but maybe people are just taking a long time to read Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn or whatever. But anyways, that's my library story. So just be really cautious. And the woman did say that if I notice anything when I check it out, to let them know. So I'll be doing that. I'll be really more paranoid now. Next, Demon Knights Volume 2, The Avalon Trap. On the road to Albasarum, the Demon Knights learn the tale of Madame Xanadu and Etrigan and the twisted love they share. But even more twists abound as the knights arrive to an assassinated Merlin. Now they must travel to fabled land of Avalon in search of a way to revive their legendary wizard. But what they find on their way is a threat more dangerous than they could have expected, and a betrayal from one of their own. And Demon Knights Volume 3, The Gathering Storm. Betrayed by Etrigan and trapped in hell, the Demon Knights must find a way to escape the clutches of Lucifer. To do so, one of the Demon Knights must make the ultimate sacrifice. Everything changes for the Demon Knights in this volume, directly connecting to the mysterious Black Diamond. So I finished up. That's it for the New 52 with the Demon Knights. And as Emily Middleton had said, and Tom had also said, very good. So I recommend those three. Not a lot of good things came out of the New 52, so you gotta hold on to what you can. Next is Supergirl Being Super by Mariko. See, I wonder about this. I have a teacher colleague whose name is Mariko, but it seems like consistently the Japanese is very close to the first syllable, the accent. I'm going to have to ask someone. So I almost wonder if it's Mariko Tamaki. I don't know. Tamaki. Because Haruka Tamaki, I don't know. But anyways, we'll say Mariko Tamaki or Tamaki and Joelle Jones. Okay. She's super strong. She can fly. She crash landed on Earth in a rocket ship. But for Kara Danvers, winning the next track meet, celebrating her 16th birthday, and surviving her latest mega zit are her top concerns. Oh, that was pretty funny. And with the help of her best friends and her kinda infuriating but totally loving adoptive parents, she just might be able to put her troubling dreams, shattered glimpses of another world behind her. Until an earthquake shatters her small town of Midvale and uncovers secrets about her past she thought would always stay buried. Now, Kara's incredible powers are kicking into high gear, and people she trusted are revealing creepy ulterior motives. The time has come for her to choose between the world where she was born and the only world she's ever known. Will she find a way to save her town and be super, or will she crash and burn? So I'm going to have a bunch of graphic novel stuff, and that's basically San Diego Comic-Con. Comixology always drops a bunch of sales. And I had seen this, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And one of the people I trust actually is Mariko Tamaki, or Mariko Tamaki. And when I saw that she had this, I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. And I liked it. I think it's a great retelling, and I really recommend it. Next is Jane, and shout out to fruit stand owner Katana Banana, David A. Gutierrez, for leading me to this, and it's by Aline McKenna and Ramon K. Perez. And McKenna, I think you might know her from The Devil Wears Prada and My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Growing up in a broken home in a small fishing town, Jane dreamed of escaping to art school and following the allure of New York City. When that dream becomes a reality, however, it's not long before she feels out of place by the size of the city and the town of her peers. She soon discovers her place as she begins to nanny a young girl named Adele, but that is upended when she falls for the girl's father, Rochester, a sardonic man of power, wealth, and unexpected charm. Jane learns that in the world of New York's elite, secrets are the greatest extravagance, and she'll have to decide if she should trust the man she loves or do whatever it takes to protect Adele from the consequences of his deception. If you haven't figured it out by now, this is a retelling, a modernization of Jane Eyre, and I thought it was really good. Next, Grass Kings Volume 1 by Matt Kint and Tyler Jenkins. Three brothers who rule their own trailer park kingdom must face off against the sheriff of a neighboring town who wants her territory. This is a critically acclaimed rural mystery series chronicling the tragic lives of the Grass Kings, three brothers and rulers of a self-sufficient trailer park kingdom, a fiefdom of the hopeless and lost seeking a promised land. The Grass Kingdom is run by eldest brother Robert, who has been grief-stricken since losing his daughter years ago. When a mysterious young woman flees to their community in search of safety, Robert takes her in. As her true identity comes to light, Robert must decide if his chance at atonement is worth risking the entire kingdom. This really different idea, and I had been interested in it, but waiting for a sale because it was just super expensive and was not going down on Comixology. And I recommend it. And it's beautiful, beautiful watercolors. And Persephone by Loic Locatelli Komorowski. I apologize. An adaptation of the Greek myth of Demeter and her daughter Persephone in an exciting universe that blends high fantasy adventure with visuals reminiscent of Japanese anime and 1950s American-style comics. Persephone is an ordinary girl, which is exactly what is bothering her. She may be the adopted daughter of the famous magician Demeter, but Persephone struggles to find her place alongside such a force of nature. Driven by recurring nightmares as well as a budding curiosity, Persephone decides to explore the secrets of her birth, which everyone seems rather intent on keeping from her. With or without help, Persephone will embark on an epic adventure deep into the underworld where she'll discover far more than she bargained for. Again, we've got a lot of myths and classic stuff here, but this was a great... All these are weird retellings. It's like the theme here, but this was another great retelling, and the art was also, I think, original and in a different style. An amalgamation, of certain things, so give this a shot as well. And finally, I think the last retelling is Circe by Madeline Miller. And I will say that I think, even though I own Achilles now, or Song of Achilles, that I did like Circe more than I did Achilles. So just, take that for what it is worth. In the house of Helios, god of the sun and mightiest of the Titans. That's interesting. A daughter is born, but Circe is a strange child, not powerful like her father, not viciously alluring like her mother. Turning to the world of mortals for companionship, she discovers that she does possess power, the power of witchcraft, which can transform rivals into monsters and menace the gods themselves. Threatened, Zeus banishes her to a deserted island where she hones her occult craft, tames wild beasts, and crosses paths with many of the most famous figures in all of mythology, including the Minotaur, Daedalus and his doomed son Icarus, the murderous Medea, and of course wily Odysseus. But there is danger too for a woman who stands alone, and Circe unwittingly draws the wrath of both men and gods, ultimately finding herself pitted against one of the most terrifying and vengeful of the Olympians. To protect what she loves most, Circe must summon all her strength and choose once and for all whether she belongs with the gods she is born from or the mortals she has come to love. With unforgettably vivid characters, mesmerizing language, and page-turning suspense, Circe is a triumph of storytelling, an intoxicating epic of family rivalry, palace intrigue, love and loss, as well as a celebration of indomitable female strength in a man's world. Yes, my first experience with Circe was probably being played by Bernadette Peters in the TV version of The Odyssey, which was Odysseus was played by Armand Assante, I think his name is. I know, what was her name? Isabella Rossellini was Athena. So I've had history. I mean, that was before 6th grade. That was like 5th grade maybe. So yeah, Circe, I think she's a great character. Of course, reading the Odyssey, you should have some experience with her, as well as she is mentioned in the Aeneid. But again, Madeline Miller does a great job, and I recommend that first, I think, before the Song of Achilles, but it depends, I guess, probably on which tale of Homer's you appreciate more. So there you go, lots to look at, and they're all retellings. Remember, you can send any questions or comments to batgirltheoracle@gmail.com. Find the show on Google Play and Stitcher. Like the show on Facebook. Follow it on Twitter @BatgirlTheOracle. And follow the Batman Universe on Facebook and Twitter as well. Be sure to also support the Batman Universe by subscribing to Patreon. And once again, thanks to Mile High Comics for sponsoring Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast. Be sure to send me what your thoughts were on the Batman wedding, as well as, of course, No Man's Land Part 1. Next month we have No Man's Land Part 2, and my guest will be Shagalicious himself, so something to look forward to. But until next time, fly on, Babs lovers.
Just plain Barbara Gordon, masquerading for a lark as she rides into the night on her special Batgirl cycle. Who knows? Is the dynamic duo destined to become the triumphant trio? Only time will tell us more about this dazzling daredoll.
I love a happy ending, don't you?